Good evening, everyone. It's 6:27. I'm calling the meeting of the Mountain View Wisdom Trustees back to order after closed session, and I would like to report that no action was taken in closed session.
I can move this.
And now this is a special evening, and we're happy to see so many of you out here in the audience and have you on the staff. It's our special recognition evening, and I believe Ms. Geisels is. Take it away.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting a new mic. Tonight's a very special night because we get to honor our employees who work so hard every single day. So we're going to start with our years of recognition, our years of service, and I'm going to ask the board and staff to stand up and come up front. They're going to do a lot of handshaking tonight. So we're going to start with our years of service, and we're starting with 10 years of service. So when I call your name, we would like you to come up, start here with Trustee Wheeler, shake hands all the way down, and then my wonderful assistant, Alicia Hicks, has your pin and a little token of our appreciation. And then from there, we will do each and every year, and then retirees, and then after that, our classified employee of the year, and then, of course, our teacher of the year. So on that note, I'd like to get started, and I would like to announce Lydia Ackerman, 10 years of service. We have Shannon Arbildo, 10 years of service. Michael Brown, 10 years of service. Timothy Kessel, 10 years of service. Joanna Dubee, 10 years of service. Maja Engelhart, 10 years of service. Anna Orlovic, 10 years of service. Maria Rosas, 10 years of service. Vernoris Taylor, 10 years of service. Diana Zapata, 10 years of service. Carrie Amaya, 10 years of service. Gloria Arieta Calderon, 10 years of service. Purvi Gandhi, 10 years of service. Jose Ordonez, 10 years of service. Joanne Pedroza, 10 years of service. Sunita Rao, 10 years of service. Constance Russell, 10 years of service. Jose Topete, 10 years of service. Jose, right here. Reina Vargas, 10 years of service. Bettina Weckerman, 10 years of service. I saw you, Bettina. And now for our 15 years of service. Carol Abramson, 15 years of service. Jennifer Gatterlund, 15 years of service. Carrie Katsuyama, 15 years of service. Judy Levy, 15 years of service. Turn around, Judy. Cindy Lundberg, 15 years of service. Robert Poling, 15 years of service. Barbara Scott, 15 years of service. Judy. Lisa Silberman Kafka, 15 years of service. Colleen Walsh, 15 years of service. Jean West, 15 years of service. Evelyn Wester, 15 years of service. Trisha Willis, 15 years of service. Cheryl Fonda, 15 years of service. Wendy Van Gaspeck, 15 years of service. Still for 10? I did say Malcolm. Oh, you didn't hear me? Okay, I'll do him after. Carmen Osorio, 15 years of service. Isabel Ramos Navarro, 15 years of service. And we found out we had one 10-year of service individual who we missed, and he is here tonight, Malcolm Axtell, 10 years of service. And now on to our 20 years of service. Lisa Black. Yeah, Lisa. Teresa Coughlin. Rebecca Escobar. Dolores Lopez. Arturo Gomez. Gerardo Gutierrez. Donna Hataqueda. Maria Ornelas. Jacqueline Scharf. Jacqueline Velasco. And those are our 20 years. And now for our 25 years of service. Melanie Hibbs. Teresa Ochoa. Right here, Teresa. Got it. And now for our 30 years of service, Paula Doritis. Turn around, Paula. Jose Duenas. Abraham Farias. And rounding out our 30 years of service, Deborah Stone Tubin. Congratulations to our 30 years of service employees. And the last person we would like to acknowledge for years of service is an individual who has 45 years of service with the Mountain View Wisdom School District. I don't know if she is here this evening, Miss Esther Knabb. So with your help, a big round of applause for our 10, 15, 20, 25 years, 30, and 45 years of service. So now I'd like to acknowledge our retirees for this year. We have, I believe, 12. The first one is Mr. Michael Hill. I don't believe Mr. Hill is here this evening, but just a bit about him. He's dedicated the last 14 years here at the district to various roles in maintenance, operations, and transportation. He worked as custodian to grounds, and most recently is the district utility worker. He put a very great deal of pride into his work, and principals throughout the district enjoyed working with him, as he described him as vigilant, honest, and extremely detail-oriented. We hope he has a fantastic retirement. A round of applause for Mr. Hill, please. Our next individual is Miss Rhonda Colcord. Is she here? Come on up, Miss Colcord. Rhonda has most recently served as Crittenden's library technician and previously as an instructional assistant. Rhonda's time at Crittenden, she created an environment where students enjoy and look forward to going to the library. She had a wonderful way of relating to students who will surely miss her as she enters into this new and exciting time of retirement. We hope that you enjoy every minute of your retirement, just as we've enjoyed every minute of working with you. It's sad to see you go, but we're very happy that you reached this milestone. Best wishes. Congratulations. Miss Gurdeep Mann, I thought I saw you. Gurdeep came to the district in 2000, and over the last 18 years as an instructional assistant, she's become a valued member of the special day class special needs learning community. She's always done what is best for students and she works with, and she shows a great deal of compassion, care, and support. Her calm and patient personality has made it easy for her to relate to children. We hope you enjoy the rewards of your hard work, and congratulations on your retirement. Jackie Velasco, who I don't believe is here, has served as an instructional assistant in her 20 years with the district, and she's made an incredibly positive impact on students. She had a way of relating and drawing in students with her new ideas. She created a welcoming environment and the staff she worked with was extremely grateful for her support and positive attitude. Wishing her much success in her retirement that she has had with Mountain View Wisman. You deserve a successful and fulfilling time in your life. Congratulations, Jackie. Kim Thompson. Kim started Kim Thompson started her career with the Mountain View Wisman School District as a substitute in 1996. Give me a hug while I read this. She was hired as a classroom teacher in 97 at Bub. She accepted the role of TOSA for Math and Continuous Improvement during the 2007-8 school year. She took on the challenge of assistant principal at Graham in January 2010 and became principal at Graham of July 2010. During her tenure as principal at Graham, she garnered a reputation of generosity towards students, staff, and community. One teacher recalls Kim donating all of her accumulated book points so that her class could order 2 boxes of books from a publisher. The Graham staff expressed appreciation for the time she took to listen, mentor, and share her experience. We will always remember Kim's contagious smile and ability to put everyone at ease. We wish her the absolute best in her new adventure. I know she's not here this evening, but Cindy Grogan. Cindy has been with the district for 23 years. She was one of the warm and friendly smiles you saw in the Graham office and was a vital member of their team. Her professionalism and efficient work was not only recognized by her Graham family, but by the district office as well. She is truly appreciated. We were fortunate to have her in our district. We will miss her greatly. But we also know that she will love and enjoy this retirement. Best of luck to Cindy in this new stage of her life. Francisco Sanchez. Francisco joined the district in 1992, and over the last 26 years, he has contributed a great deal as a custodian, a general maintenance worker, and most recently as the at-risk intervention supervisor at Therakoff Elementary. Francisco is well respected and serves a great role model for children of Therakoff. You often see children running across campus when they spot Francisco because they look up to him and enjoy being in his company. He's been invaluable to us, and we will miss seeing his friendly face around the district. It is inspiring to see such a hard worker finally earn what they deserve of all the hours they put in. Enjoy yourself and congratulations, Francisco. Maria Gamboa. Maria, is she here? Maria joined the district team in 1990, and during her time with the district, she has formed incredible relationships with staff, parents, students as she encounters. She worked as an instructional assistant, was an asset to the bilingual program at Slater, where her enthusiastic attitude drew the students in with her storytelling and singing. She has most recently been with Child Nutrition, where the staff took notice of a positive change in the department. It's been a pleasure working with you for the past 28 years. Congratulations on this new and exciting chapter, Maria. And finally, Sherry Wiley. Sherry started in Mountain View teaching at Slater Elementary in 1989. She joined the Landell staff. She has served the district not only as a teacher, but as a PTA president at Landell's when her daughters went through Landell's, and she also served as MVEA president. She's known as the expert on colonial times in America. She dedicated much of her time in researching Landellsburg by frequently traveling to Williamsburg. We hope that Sherry will enjoy further travels during her retirement. Congratulations, Sherry. So on that note, a big round of applause for our retirees. And now a really exciting part of the evening. We are going to introduce our classified employee of the year as well as our teacher of the year. And in doing so, instead of me doing it, I would like to bring up Aisha Junil, who was last year's classified employee of the year, to introduce this year's classified employee of the year. Aisha?
Okay. Our classified employee of the year. Our classified employee of the year is Maria Moreno Lane. Maria Moreno Lane began working in our district in 2005 as a community liaison at Castro Elementary and is currently an instructional assistant for special education at Landell School. Before she worked in our district, she worked for U.S. Spain. Maria stated in her cover letter to our district when she first applied, she said that she was very organized, worked well under pressure, and had excellent verbal communication skills. Maria has readily exhibited these skills and much more. In Maria's most current position, she is an instructional assistant at Landell School. She has truly demonstrates a commitment to assisting her colleagues daily with her cheerful and can-do attitude. She is always willing to lend a helping hand wherever, whenever she is needed, all the while staying positive and displaying a great role model behavior for her colleagues. Maria wants her students in her charge to thrive, to do their best, and help them to challenge themselves to improve so they can learn and succeed in building individual academic excellence. Sorry, I'm nervous. Maria comes to Landell's where she works diligently, inspire, prepare, and empower every student to do their best. She is a role model to both staff and teachers alike. Please join me in congratulating Maria Moreno Lane as our classified employee of the year.
I asked her if she wanted to say a few words. She said no. So now we have our last and final award, which is our Teacher of the Year. And to do the introductions is last year's Teacher of the Year, Mr. David Franklin.
Hi. Tech issues again, sorry. How's everybody doing? You get it started. I'm gonna borrow this chair. Gail, I need your assistance. There you go. I'm gonna move this stuff. Sorry. So I'm gonna be speaking over here, but some stuff's gonna show up there, so you can like tennis back and forth if you want. Okay, there you go.
Short. I'm good.
All right, you ready?
Got it.
You guys ready? Teacher of the year. Like, can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Like many teachers at Bub and across the district, I've had the honor and privilege to observe firsthand the passion, dedication, and love that, getting this, Kathy, I got it. Kathy. Oh,
Tilted.
sorry, I'm a teacher, yeah. Glad you caught that. Dedication and love that Kathy pours into her relationships that she creates with our students, their families, her colleagues, the curriculum, her classroom, and every corner of her experience at Bub. Mrs. Patterson. Oh, you didn't know. It's fun, they're sliding.
Yeah.
That's okay. You get it. Kathy Patterson. She's over there. She taught my son Samuel with all the qualities a parent would want from a teacher: love, compassion, humor, creativity, and imagination, a dedication to teaching to the highest level of expectations for academic excellence, an understanding that every student has their own need and learning style. Mrs. Patterson, Mrs. Kathy Patterson, Teacher of the Year, met all these expectations and more. It is like she was born, maybe even destined to teach. Check this out. Wait. Hold on a second. Teacher O the Ya. Okay, but wait. I asked her what her middle name was, and it was such a coincidence. I'm not telling you, she's asked me not to, but she has some letters that are going to help out, so we don't need this. There's teacher O, and there's an E there. We're still missing some. So I'm going to let her borrow some from me. F for Franklin, teacher of. My middle name's Howard, so I'll give her the H from Howard. And then there's some more from my name in there. Oh my gosh, Teacher of the Year. It's in her name.
That's cute. Good. Good.
Thank you. Kathy, when I was told I was nominated by my colleagues for this career honor, I really spent the summer freaking out about the speech. You know, like every other teacher, they were like, oh man, we have to go talk in front of everybody. But I also had all sorts of crazy dreams and fantasies over the summer, like when I was sleeping. You know, the one about being seated at the finest table. Here you go, Teacher of the Year. You know, getting pulled over by police officer James, and oh, Mr. Franklin, it's you. Don't worry, 95, you're good. But I had this reoccurring dream, and it was me looking out at recess. I was looking for Principal Cindy or Mrs. Campion or Coach Kathy, and they were always walking away from me, and I was trying to catch them. I would be bombarded by all these kids needing something, and I could never figure out where the teachers I was looking for ended up. They simply disappeared before I could catch up to them, until I found out that you were Teacher of the Year. I finally finished my dream, and I reenacted it for you. Hope you don't mind. Sorry. There she is, Coach Kathy. Oh man, a kid.
Mr. Franklin, I need a Band-Aid for my cut.
There she is again. I'm trying to get her.
Tie my shoe.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll open her. she just vanished. Mrs. Clark, have you seen Coach Kathy? Oh, come on, she was just down here. All right, thanks, dude. She ended up running. T-O-T-Y. I don't know what that means. All right. Check in here. This is storage. Teacher of the Year. Scan here. Wow, thanks guys. You knew my drink order. T-O-T-Y, Teacher of the Year. Thank you. This is amazing. I can't believe they have my drink order ready and anything. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, no way. Other Teachers of the Year. This is amazing. This is amazing.
Congratulations, and thank you for representing all of the teachers of Mount View School District.
Teacher of the Year. Great job. Congratulations. Although it's just a dream, I heard the district office has a Starbucks portal. Although it's just a dream, being a Teacher of the Year was real. It embodies the commitment to a career that brings challenge and reward. The reality is that you are being recognized by your colleagues and your friend. You're over there. You're over there. Hi. For being the sort of teacher that inspires us and brings a joy to watch in action. Thank you for being awesome and for doing it with a smile, with the utmost professionalism, with the deepest sense of duty, with this amazing ability to see the best in others, especially the kids and your colleagues, the teachers, us, and with your guiding hand. They asked me to pass a torch, but I don't like to play with fire. So I'm gonna pass this t-shirt. I don't know if you saw it. Teacher of the Year, TOTY, Mrs. Patterson, 2018, 2019, as well as thanking each and every person here. As well as thanking each and everyone here for working hard this year to bring the best experience to our students and the families of the Mountain View Wisdom School District. Kathy Patterson.
No, we have to selfie. Another round of applause for all of our employees tonight. So trustees, I present to you our years of service, our retirees, our classified, and our Teacher of the Year for your recognition. Yes, I am asking that the board officially recognize all identified employees for their years of service, retirees, and our special recognition of classified and Teacher of the Year. Thank you. Congratulations. So,
we'll take a short break. It's 7:07, a 5-minute break, and we'll start up again at 7:12. And thank you, everybody, from the bottom of our hearts. We're so thrilled to have you with the district.
No, we're leaving. We can go get dinner.
Good times.
No, that they're gonna meet later.
we don't need this little one. We don't need
Is he taking home?
There's only one cupcake left. Oh yeah, where I looked, there was only 2 cupcakes. See? Yeah. There might be some.
What's the score?
What?
What's the score?
56 off.
In halftime?
Hit the bell or the buzzer? Yeah. Exciting.
It is exciting. So we have boundaries, 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 3 boundaries. You're kidding. So how do I get things to settle? How do I get things to settle?
Three hours left.
Yeah. So do I bring that? Do I just
Good.
I hate to break up the merriment. We're so proud of all of you, but we have a really packed agenda tonight. So I'd like to call the meeting back to order. It's 7:14. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Can I make a comment here? It's with a revised personnel report. Is
Oh.
that correct?
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with a revised personnel report?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
On a motion made by trustee Gutierrez and seconded by trustee Wheeler, the consent agenda was approved with the revised personnel report. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the minutes. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. Where? No. The employee organizations. Now's the time for any members of employee organizations here this evening that would like to make some comments. Is there any representative of an employee organization that wants to speak? Okay, thank you. Any members of district committees wishing to comment to the board this evening? Okay, Dr. Rudolph, superintendent comments?
Just want to once again reiterate congratulations to our retirees as well as our employees for their years of service. And then again, a congratulations to our teacher of the year as well as our classified employee of the year. So I also want to say congratulations to all of our graduates. So I will be flying out to the East Coast tomorrow for my kids' graduation. So I will miss all of the 5th grade graduations as well as the 8th grade. But I do want to wish everyone a very safe summer. And for our kids that are leaving in 8th grade, we wish them the best of luck at either Los Altos or Mountain View High or whatever high school they choose from there.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. Now's the time for community comments. It's reserved for community members to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board and administration welcome this opportunity to listen. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the board is not permitted to take action on non-agenda items. Are there any speakers here wishing to speak on a non-agenda item? Thank you. Okay. Speakers are requested to complete a speaker card and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes? Oh, I'm sorry. Are there more? How many of you want to speak on this topic, on something not on the agenda?
So we want to talk about something that's not quite on the agenda, but since we want her to have all the time to tell her story, there's several of us who are coming with her in support.
Okay, that's fine. Will you all please fill out speaker cards?
We are doing it
And state
right
your,
now.
if everybody could state their name before you speak. And so there's 3 of you, so 9 minutes?
Okay. My name is Flor Montero.
My name is Monica Teicher.
My name is Jeanette Campos. I'm here tonight because I would like to share the incident happened to my son. He's in sixth grade, and unfortunately, he was bullied in two different incidents. The first incident happened in the classroom, the last period of the class. The boy was bothering him physically and verbally, and he asked him to stop, but he didn't stop. Then, unfortunately, the math teacher, Mr. Haas, saw the incident and immediately took them to the office. And they wrote a report. My son wrote a report, the one that you have in the folder. And I got a call from the office telling me what about the incident. And when I heard it, I was like, oh my gosh, how that happened to my son? And when I heard about that, I thought that everything was taken care of and that everything was going to stop there. But unfortunately, it didn't. Then that happened one Wednesday. The following week on Friday, my son is usually on time to get out from school. He always called me from the office because I didn't want to get a phone for him. And he said, Mom, I'm here, I'm outside. But that day on Friday, he wasn't showing up and I was worried. I said, what is going on? He is always like, Mom, where are you? And then I saw him running to the office and then I was getting worried. And then I came out and then he called me from the office telling me, Mom, I got jumped by 3 kids and I want you to come. And I was walking and then he was walking out and he said, oh, I gave the report to the office and we can go home. And I said, what? How can we go home? How can we leave this like that? The kids hit him in his chest, in his face, and there were 3 of them. They was outside of the innovation center. Nobody saw anything, and nobody there was supervision there. So I came up, I was asking what is going on? What can we do? What is next? What would happen if it was your kid? What would you do? I was having so many questions in my head. I was so worried. And then I said, no, I need to do something else because the only answer I got, it was, oh, we're gonna take care of the report and then we will call you later to see what is gonna be next. I said, no, I'm not leaving here. So I was going to the police department to file a report because it was not the first time. It was the second time and it was jumped by 3 kids. It was not like something, nothing happened, something serious happened. And I started to question myself, could I prevent this if I do something the first time? I didn't do anything. And I was I said to my husband, I feel like I failed as a mom because I could do something differently and maybe he didn't have to go through the second time. And then on Monday, I called we called the police. The police got to the school. They wrote the report. They said the police told me that he was not the officer that works with the school, so he couldn't help me that much, but he wrote the report and he said that he was going to give it to the right person and said that they will contact me. At this time, I called the officer James and he said that he was gonna follow up, but I haven't heard anything about the incident or what's going on. I've been coming to school to see or looking for answers what should we do? I know everybody said we're gonna take care of the problem and it's gonna be okay, but I'm not feeling okay. I don't feel safe. Every time that I send my child to school, I'm thinking, what is gonna be next? Now I have to pick him up in the back of the school. He was starting to ride his bike to school. I cannot send him by himself. If this happened as the problem at school, what is going to happen when he's outside is even worse. Our life has changed since that incident a lot. And I just want to ask, what can we do about it? I'm not here to fight with the school. I'm here to find a solution, to do something different. As a mom, I don't want any other parent to have the same problem, you thinking your son is going to school to learn, to get good grades, to have education, not to have this kind of incident. Excuse me. It's just so hard. And I'm here tonight. It's not easy. It's not easy to be here, But I don't want this to continue, not for my son, not for any other kid, not for any other parent. It's just so difficult to get through this kind of things. And I just want to ask, how can we do it? How can, a school has 900 kids. We have only 3 or 4 yard duties. How can we prevent this? What else can we do? Can we have some cameras on campus? Can we have more people to help? Can we do some classes for the kids? What are the disciplines that the kids are having? I have heard the kids came to my son, other kids that they don't know him, and they said, hey, we know what happened to you. And then you want us to beat those kids up? My son said, no, the office knows what is going on. And they told, oh, you know what? Nothing is going to happen to them. And I've been thinking, I'm worried. Not only for my son, what about if my son said, okay, go ahead and do something else? When are we going to stop the violence? Well, how is going to end up all of this? So thank you. And check the reports and the things that are in the folder. And thank you for listening tonight.
Thank you for sharing your story with us. I'm sorry that you have to.
Can I ask Dr. Rudolph if he can give us some information about steps that the school is taking?
Under the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act, they cannot disclose.
You speaking to a mic?
Why don't you and I share?
Under the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act, I cannot disclose anything that's occurred in public. I will send you an update.
Are we doing everything that we can to help the situation?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. Okay, we'll share. Thank you. Okay, the next item.
It looks like there's somebody else.
Oh, I'm sorry? Okay. How much time do we have, Ms. Luga? I didn't realize that there was a fourth speaker.
I
2
can
minutes?
do it in 2.
Okay, thank you. And say your name, please, also.
I lost my comments. Of course, things go wrong when you're here. Sorry. My name is Bradley Dux. I'm a parent of two students at Monte Loma Elementary. One is going into 4th grade in the upcoming year. The school has made the decision to have combined classes there, 4th and 5th grade, grade level, or school-wide, right? So all 4th and all 5th grades. The need to have these combined classrooms is less than ideal, in my opinion. And I'm confident that nearly all parties involved would opt for straight grade level classes if this was an option there. Sorry. I'd like to recognize that the plan put forth by Ms. Higgins seems very well thought out and very practical given the situation. There are some negatives to it, but I think given the constraints, there's not a terribly better option to choose. What I'm here to ask for from the district is extra support for teachers, instructional coaches, staff that, that have to work with these combination classes, not just at Monte Loma, but district-wide. It's not done grade-wide anywhere else, as far as I know, but there are some combination classes. Yeah, so, a lot of the negatives have to deal with diving into the deep end in Monte Loma's case, but not having a traditional core classroom means that there's a lack of resources. So would the board please consider sponsoring additional trainings, coaching, other resources specifically aimed at combination classes?
Thank you for your comments. Okay, the next item on the agenda is we moving into the review and discussion section. And we have an update from the Mountain View Educational Foundation.
I would like to welcome Melissa Armanini, who is the Executive Director for MVF, to give us an update, as well as the President, Andrea Moss. So.
Okay. Unless I miss things. Sorry, nervous, I feel ya. I'm Melissa Armanini, the Executive Director of the Sandra Moss.
Melissa, do you mind trying to speak into the microphone for the folks at
Tonight.
home?
Okay, I'm here tonight to present our second check to the district. Back in January, we presented one for $319,000. This is our second check for over $320,000. We had a great year, and I really can just not say enough in terms of thanks and gratitude to the parent community and the community members in Mountain View for supporting what we do in our quest to really bring to light the vision of a school district where every child has every opportunity at every school. And I wanted to thank these individual donors, the corporate sponsors, and the district as well, because I think you guys helping us share this message and get the word out about how important it is and the partnership we have has made a huge difference and impact in getting the word out, because a lot of parents do know what we do, but not everyone does yet. And we're planning to change that and even be more aggressive in a good way next year, getting the word out about what we do. Part of this check is $15,000 is a directed donation for musical instrument repair and purchase, which happened at our winter gala, where we changed things up and had a new format, and it was very successful. So folks happily raised their paddles to get instrument repairs and purchased. And next year, we're adding that into our budget as well to kind of permanently, or at least for next year, embrace this idea of art and music and science and hands-on science and field trips for every child at every school. And it was a great year, and we're very thankful for all of your support, all of you, for making this happen, and looking forward to more next year. Do I want to add anything?
No, I also just want to recognize our board members who are all volunteers and dedicate a lot of hours to the district.
Absolutely.
So thank you, and we appreciate the partnership that we are growing with the district, particularly Dr. Rudolph, Dr. Clark, and Shelley Hausman has been really supportive. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a huge thanks to MVF.
And I just want to express my sincere gratitude for all the things that MVF does. Today, Melissa dragged me over to Synopsys so we could talk to another corporate donor, corporate sponsor. And so these individuals devote a lot of time to make sure that our kids get all the access and resource. And I think even the $15,000 that you raised in one night for instruments just speaks volumes to the hard work that they do. And so we are grateful for all the work you put in.
Hear, hear. Okay, well, thank you. And now we're moving into the review and discussion seeking input portion of the meeting. And the next item on the agenda is transitioning to the 2019-2020 boundaries. And I believe that there are 3 cards. So when we get to that point, if any other speakers want to speak, please fill out a card now and give it to Ms. Loga.
All right, so you have me for the next 3 topics. So bear with me. Apparently, at times I can get long-winded, so I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible. We are continuing our work on transitioning to the new school boundaries in the 2019-2020 school year. This is part 3. We have initiated construction. We're currently working on a staffing plan, which included the hiring of a principal. And so now this is the time to finalize the boundaries. And we've had this discussion a couple of times. What I will say is on the table, as well as in front of you, is that we were able, between our last meeting and today, to work with Decision Insight to actually plot all of our entering kinder students into the system so we know where they are headed, which is something that normally we wouldn't do until the start of the school year. So you'll see updated numbers for transition zone 1, for exemption 1 and 2 in front of you. And for the publics, there's a couple copies over there also. All right, so our desired outcomes here is we want to create a policy that's easy to understand and implement. I know we've talked about this several times. There are currently 26 policies. Each policy at times can be a little cumbersome or interesting to understand. And so we want to simplify that. And we also want to make it as equitable as possible. But more importantly, we start registration in January. And so we want to have a system that's in place because we transitioned to an online enrollment system this year. We need to build or rebuild that system between now and January so that we can continue our online process. Otherwise, we'll have to revert back to the old process, which is more of a paper process. And I think our parents really enjoyed the new system more than the previous one. And I know that several of you even commented if you had to register your kid going into the app and simply clicking a button as opposed to all the other steps is really the most favorable part. So this is the boundaries. We've been talking about this for a couple years. And so we are currently looking at students that are enrolled in K through 3. Again, the reason why we're looking at kids that are enrolled K through 3 is because these are students that will be in our school by the time the new school opens, with the third graders being our will be fifth graders in the year 2019-2020. Okay, so I'm going to skip past this because these are various areas, questions that were asked before. And so you'll hear me refer to transition zones as opposed to individual neighborhoods. It's just a more technical term. And so just know that 1 represents Shoreline, 5 represents Willowgate, 3 represents, I believe, the Wagon Wheel. So, but we refer to them as transition zones because these are a part of our old boundaries that are currently moving. And so again, this is the data that we've had on this. I'm going to fly through this because this is from last week and the week before. It shows how many kids are currently going to be moved. And I think this is actually the old presentation.
It is.
So, yep, this is the old one. Okay, Kathy? Yeah, sorry about that. It should say version 2. In the board meeting presentation, there it is, right there. There it was. Version 2, yes, thank you. Okay, let's start this from the top again. I'm gonna fly past this, you know the goal. Okay, so we're gonna dive right into the exemptions. I'll make this pretty simple so that you can talk and deliberate, and then staff can jot down some notes so that we can bring back a recommendation. So the first exemption deals with students who are out of their attendance boundary, enrolled in 5th grade during the 2019-2020 school year. And then we've added in, at the request of the board, sibling is actually exempted for the year. And this exemption sunsets at the end of the 2019-2020 school year, meaning that a 5th grader and their sibling will be allowed to remain at their current school for 1 year. The year afterwards, the younger sibling, regardless of the grade, would have to transition to their new school. And the rationale behind this is that we've heard a lot of concern about dropping off at 2 different elementary schools. And so the board said, what would it look like if we added siblings to this? And so we were able to pull the numbers. So the first thing is that we look at the capacity of the site. So we've been building our schools to 450. We have not eliminated any of our permanent classrooms. We did, however, have a number of portables that were at the end of their lifespan. And so those portables are no longer on campus. And we've used that area to make room for the MURs. And then, as I showed last week in the last presentation, we also have space for our YMCA program as well as 2 flex rooms. So board direction 2.5 years ago was to create schools that were around the size of 450. Those schools have 2 flex rooms as well as a room for the YMCA. So there are 3 extra rooms that are over there. And so that gives us our full capacity of around 450 at particular sites. Therakoff, as well as Montaloma, they have permanent classrooms that are already bigger. We're not destroying any of those classrooms. So they have, as you can see, extra capacity. So if we were to exempt 5th graders and their siblings, the impact of that exemption means that Bub's new enrollment for the year of 2019-2020 will be 529. Castro will be 314. Huff, 527. Landos, 545. And again, in the presentation that you can see the way that we did the math to calculate what the particular numbers are, so that you can see its impact. And then in terms of the portables, we would need 4 portables at each one of those sites in order to house the number of students that are there. And again, I just want to remind everyone that the state looks at the use of a classroom as a 25-to-1 ratio. And even though in K through 3, it's 24-to-1, and in grades 4 and 5, it goes to 30-to-1, we still use the average to calculate capacity at 25-to-1. So that is how we derive the need for 4 additional portables. Now, what I do want to say is that at these 3 sites, the one advantage we have is because we already placed temporary portables over there, we do not have to pay the construction fees to add the portables. So to add 3 portables that we would rent would cost us around $380-something thousand if we didn't have any portables on that site. Since we already have the portables on those sites, the electric is already hooked up, the grading, all of that's been taken care of. The only fee that we're incurring right now is the cost of the lease for that particular portable. I think that's an important distinction to make because if we were to purchase those, the cost jumps to about $780,000 for every 3 portables. So that's why the cost is about $38,000. The second exemption that we have is to look at all of the students who are out of their boundary, but this time we want to look at 4th and 5th graders during the 2019-2020 school year. And then we also want to take the younger sibling of that student, or either one of those students, and they will both be allowed to remain at their school. And so this exemption will actually expire during the 2021-2020 school year. And what that allows is for the 4th grader to actually matriculate out. And in both of these cases, it is a 1-to-1 ratio of students that we know who are siblings, but there is a possibility that they could have a younger sibling who hasn't enrolled yet. And so we just need to be cognizant of that. But as of right now, with the data that we have, we know that the number of siblings, at least one of the siblings. And so again, what we can see is that at Bub, enrollment then jumps to 549. At Huff, becomes 561. At Landos is 565. And so the big distinction here is North Westman is going to take the largest hit in terms of its population because you can see about 50 students would be exempt from actually attending that school, which is what brings it down to 248. So North Westman would open with 248 students that year. And the other ones is Castro lost about 4 kids. So the movement is is not as big as its impact over at the North Westman School. So the third exemption is to take the students who are out of their boundary, and then we're going to add in the students who reside in transition zone 5. And so that came up at the last board meeting as a possibility of being exempt. And so those students will be allowed to remain in their currently enrolled school. And in this case, that's Landos. This exemption will sunset at the end of the 2023-2024 school year because it is an exemption for the students who are currently enrolled in the school system. It wouldn't apply to any student that enrolls during the 2019-2020 school year. And then I will say, an error was actually pointed out to us. The bottom number for the 583 is correct, but the top number above it should be 565. So we will correct that. So what happens is that if you take, we're looking at this one as not as an exemption within itself. It is an exemption that is added on to another exemption. We could easily back that one out and create it as its own exemption if you did not grandfather, if you did not exempt fifth graders or you did not exempt fourth and fifth graders and their siblings. So if you did that, if you exempted fifth graders and their siblings, Lando's enrollment would move up to 565. If you exempt fourth and fifth graders, Lando's enrollment reaches 583. And as you can see, the cost of portables just at Lando's continues to increase depending on the number on which option you choose. And then the last one, we actually did not calculate the numbers of this one because this one is more of an exemption that allows students to stay at a school that is under enrolled or under its seat capacity. And so if they are out of their boundaries and they are enrolled in a school that has been identified as lower than capacity for enrollment in the 2019-2020 school year, which means that no more than 75% of the seats are occupied. Every year we would identify this one, and there's a reason why I'm saying this right now, because it actually came up in the Enrollments Priorities Task Force as a priority. Every year we would identify the name, the school, and it would fluctuate, and we could say, so one year it could be Therakoff, another year it could be Lando's, just depends as long as we're under, if it's at the 75% mark. Parents will be allowed to stay, or in the case of the Enrollments Priorities Task Force recommendation, they will be allowed to enroll at that school on a one-year basis, and every year they will reapply, provided that the 75% exists. But in this case, exemption 4 allows students who are currently at an under-enrolled school to stay at that school because there isn't as great of an impact. And so that exemption would actually sunset in the 2023-2024 school year because you're looking at 5 years of kids that will be enrolled. And so they would impact those. And so the next steps, we're going to take your feedback. We'll bring back a recommendation. But the goal is to have a vote by June 14th on the exemptions so that we can start planning and communicating with parents that are going to be impacted in the coming school year over the summer and moving forward. And so I turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. Trustees, any clarifying questions before we open it up for the community comments?
Yes, I'd like you to show us some maps of the transition zone so we can clearly see what transition zone 5 looks like.
You know what? That's now in the other presentation.
I have this here, if that helps.
So if we could flip to that one. There we go. Yeah.
Okay.
We got a full map. Hold on one second. So transition zone 5 is the area that is central, is the main road that comes through. It's south of Central or north of Central, and it's that's Moffett Road. And then I forget what the other side is. I think that's the highway that cuts through there. 85. Okay. And then Middlefield is at the top. And so this is the neighborhood of Willowgate.
And can I ask you, what's your intent tonight? Are you trying to get feedback? You trying to get a straw poll? What are you trying to get?
So based off of the feedback that we hear or the deliberation that you have, staff will come back with a recommendation of what we believe the exemption should be. So right now, if there is more information that you're looking for, just like last time, we'll go back and between now and the next meeting, we'll run the numbers as quickly as we can, utilizing Tony, Nubia, Carmen, and then try to bring that information back to you as quickly as possible. So the idea is that I know the last time we talked about different zones and a couple other scenarios, it just, if you have any other ideas that you would like to see, this would be the time to share those with us so that we could gather that.
Any other clarifying questions, trustees?
I have a question, President Blakely. Dr. Rudolph, when we have switched over to new attendance policies in 2019, if someone lives near lives kind of close to an under-enrolled school, but they're technically assigned to a different school, do you envision that they would be allowed to go to the intra-district transfer to the under-enrolled school, or would you imagine that not being allowed?
The Enrollment Priorities Task Force talked about this one, and staff supports it also, that at schools where there's space, if a parent chooses to enroll their child at that site, we would allow that to happen on a year-to-year basis. So I do support that approach because we do have some sites that are underutilized. And I've said this to the EPTF, and I've said this to several of you, that two of our largest sites have two of our smallest enrollments. And so I would hate to mothball Montaloma, a series of classrooms over there, as well as mothballing a series of classrooms at Therakoff, just because we don't have anything to do with it. So if we could utilize those sites a little bit more, I would be all in favor of it. I know the principals would be on both sides, to lose a couple kids, to reduce either an extra portable that's on place, or to have a little bit smaller class size. And then I know the principals at Therakoff, as well as Montaloma, and as well as the PTAs who have expressed this to me, would enjoy having more students over there. I think Castro, I don't know if Terry's here today, but she probably would say the exact same thing, that she would welcome more students. So I'm perfectly fine with underutilized sites, and which is why we support the recommendation from the Enrollment Priorities Task Force.
So how does that recommendation interact with the exemption that's in this presentation? So like if we don't adopt that exemption that allows under-enrolled 75% or below schools, kids to stay there, but we do allow that enrollment priority,
correct,
then that has the effect of that exemption, does it not?
It does. The only difference would be that in this case, you are allowing those students to stay there until it sunsets, whereas in the Enrollment Priorities Task Force case, that
is not sunsetted.
It's annual.
Oh, right, but forever. But yeah, in perpetuity, if it's under-enrolled. You lost your mic or something, yeah?
So if you adopted, if you took exemption 4 off the table. Thank you. Thank you. If you took exemption 4 off the table and adopted the Enrollment Priorities Task Force recommendation, then yes, the 2 would swap out. The only difference is that parents would have to reapply every single year. I do not anticipate that being an issue in terms of allowing students to stay enrolled, but every year we re-examine it.
Okay.
And when you said for the under-enrolled schools, 75%, are you looking at the 450 target, or are you looking at the capacity?
We are looking-
75% of what?
Sorry, this is other present. We're actually looking at the actual seat capacity of the sites. So in this case, Castro is 450, Therakoff and Montaloma are 575. So we're looking at that seat capacity, which would allow some flexibility at those particular sites, because those are permanent classrooms that we're not going to destroy or do anything with. We've renovated them, so it would be nice to utilize those sites or those rooms if we can.
Thanks. I just didn't know which number we were using as the base.
If not, we will use them for storage for district office stuff.
Okay. Any more clarifying questions, trustees? Okay, I have 8 cards from community members. We had initially allocated until 8:45 on this, so I'd like to give everybody a minute and a half. That would take us to 12 minutes. Does that seem okay, trustees? Okay, so everybody will get 90 seconds, and I'm going to read your names, and if you would just line up so that we can keep it moving. And then when you get up to the microphone, state your name. So the first one is Bradley Dux, Rich Tanner, Mohan Kampella, David Levin, Michael Boksani, sorry if I messed up your name, Cindy Chow, Tui Nguyen, sorry if I messed up your name, and Jeanette Campos. Thank you.
Thank you again, Bradley Dux again. I wanted to recognize that I appreciate the comments from the board, Dr. Rudolph, and the task force about under-enrolled schools. A couple things I wanted to say is I think the benefits were, some of which were articulated, of allowing under-enrolled or transfers and exemptions to under-enrolled schools are clear. There's very little downside. And I think to your point about just not allowing the exemptions, part of making that decision to move is contingent on some kind of stability for the children, right? So I think it's hard to say, I'm willing to go to an under-enrolled school, I'd like to, but having to re-enroll every year. So I think that I guess that's my point about the exemption, making that decision a lot easier for parents and to support the district. And the last thing, the 75% enrollment number, I'd like you to consider looking by grade level by school, because like I mentioned earlier, the combined classes is not as a site-wide thing, it is by grade as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Rich?
Minute and a half, huh? Okay, well, I'm Rich Tanner. I was on the committee or the task force that drew the map that we're talking about, as well as the enrollment priorities task force. We were assigned the task of discussing not only enrollment priorities, but also the grandfathering / exemptions. And I think we found out that was a mistake. We believed that we could examine grandfathering or exemptions scientifically, logically, have reasoned discussions. We hoped we could dig through the math from the demographers and come up with some, oh yeah, they're a clear indicator of where we go with this. We had a consensus real early, but the more we heard from parents that want grandfathering or that have their reasons for their personal child, our consensus fell apart. And it pretty well turned out that there is no rational way there's no data-driven way to answer this question. It's emotional, it's political. It wasted an awful lot of our time on the task force. And for you guys, I would say, don't try to find a logical, rational solution, because the only solution, the only part of this equation that has any numbers behind it that means anything is actual costs. What it's going to cost the district and the educational opportunities of the kids and the teachers moving around. That side of the equation has solid information and numbers. The other side doesn't. And the other side, I'm afraid the parents couldn't come up with a consensus plan. So I'm glad you guys have the problem and we don't.
Thank you, Rich. Mohan Kampella?
Good evening. My name is Mohan, and I have 2 kids who are at Landals. I have a son who's actually graduating from kindergarten tomorrow morning, and I have a daughter who's in 3rd grade and very excited about going to 4th grade. So we've been at Landals for about a year now, and both my kids are, quite happy with the teachers and their friends and the The best part for them is going in the morning on Stevens Creek Trail. It's a 10-minute walk or bike ride. And like the previous speaker said, there's probably an emotional argument more than anything else, but I would absolutely love to see exemption 3 be passed so that we can continue, my kids can continue to have the experiences at Landals for the next few years and also have a fantastic experience commuting back and forth on beautiful Stevens Creek Trail. So thank you.
Thank you. David?
Thank you. My name is David Levin. I'm the parent of a current Landals first grade student. I've appeared before you several times. Each time I've appeared, I've expressed great satisfaction and appreciation for the education experience we've had at Landals. I don't have enough time to express my gratitude towards Mrs. Perry and the rest of the staff. I've also expressed how much I enjoy biking to school every day along the Stevens Creek Trail. And finally, each time I've expressed my disappointment and frustration at the way my neighborhood has been treated by this boundary redrawing process. So the solution, if equity is truly a consideration, is to vote yes on the draft exemption 3. I appreciate Trustee Blakely's comment about the difference between 18 Landal students going to Therkoff, which is a very small number, and being the new kids, with everyone at Wishman, at the new North Wishman School who will be new, or 50 students moving from Bub to Landals. It's an entirely different experience. Finally, I want to address Trustee Wilson's written comments. You drew a parallel to us, our families, as families whose students are going to have to transition. But our family is very different from yours, Trustee Wilson. Unlike you in 2019, we're not going to be able to walk to a nearby school. We're going to have to drive across town. It's an entirely different experience, so our situations are different. Trustee Wilson, you've been a good advocate for your neighborhood. You've advocated for a new school and you've advocated for large boundaries for that school. I ask you to similarly advocate for Willowgate and Transition Zone 5. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, hi. So I'm also the parent of a kid who's at Landals, graduating kindergarten tomorrow as well. And so one of the main reasons that we chose to live in the area we do is because we're so close to the trail and we could go every day safely, no cars, and just stay healthy with the kids. And I have to say it's been a perfect experience every day. I haven't brought my kid to school by car once. And so when we heard about the redistricting, it was a bit concerning to us because now all of a sudden, instead of this nice trail that's safe for my also 3-year-old to walk with his mom to pick up his brother, now we have to go across Shoreline and Moffett and some much less pleasant routes. So we hope you'll consider exemption 3. And thank you.
Thank you. Cindy Chow?
My name is Cindy Chow. I have a 3rd grader and a 1st grader at Bub. On paper, since we moved into the district in May of 2014, my daughter has been a Huff student, but has never been able to attend due to past practices, where in March I would have had to request that she be transferred to the school that she didn't get to attend, because in January, that's when open enrollment took priority. So it was an easy feel for us to stay at Bub, which we were given. It's the next closest school, and we're grateful for that. And we had a very good experience there. So regarding exemption 1 and exemption 2, I would just hope that double force moves, as we would be part of, would be taken into consideration regardless of the grade that the student is currently entered into. So I'm sorry for my nervousness. Because we did not request the school that we are currently attending, but we never really had the opportunity to attend it given the former roles, the former rules. So I appreciate that with the redistricting, you are attempting to prevent the problem that we had, which was the inability to attend the school that we were living in. However, I would like her to graduate at the school that she will have been attending for 4 years. She will be a 5th grader at the time that the changes are made, as well as for my son, who will then be an incoming 3rd grader at that time. Thank you.
Thank you. Twee?
Hi, my name is Thuy Nguyen. I have 2 children currently enrolled at Huff, and we live in the Huff Triangle, also known as Transition Zone 2. For the past couple of years, I've attended countless attendance zones and boundary exemption related meetings. I've advocated for the Huff Triangle to remain zoned for Huff, given the nearly irrelevant number of low students affected, but unfortunately we were rezoned for Bub. With the data now available, we can see that there are only 7 kids in this transition zone, and they are all spread across various grades. I'm happy to see that the board is seriously considering exempting, at the very least, 5th graders and their siblings. Out of the 7 total kids, if this exemption passes, 4 would remain at Huff for 1 year. I've heard a lot about the financial impact of creating exemptions, especially in terms of the cost for portables. 7 kids spread across 4 grade levels will not have an impact and is insignificant on the overall count. What would be significant is the impact and emotional effects of forcing these 7 kids to leave the only school community they have known and effectively severing the relationships with teachers, other families, and friendships that have already been established. They would also not have the benefit of moving with a larger cohort of kids to help ease the transition pains. I believe each transition area should be assessed on a case-by-case basis rather than imposing an all-encompassing policy across the district. My plea today for the board is to create an exemption for the current transition zone 2 kids, allowing all 7 of them to remain in their currently enrolled school and have this exemption sunset at the end of the 2023-2024 school year. I believe this is what I had heard from the May 17th meeting, and I was disappointed to see that it was not incorporated into the exemption drafts today. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Jeanette?
Hi, my name is Jeanette Campos. I have a 3rd grader at Bub. She actually grandfathered through my son. He is about to leave the district. And with the changes, she will be in 5th grade if that happens, and moving to a different school, a different environment, I think she will have a very difficult time. Again, not all the kids are as resilient as others. Also, I would like to know, because I have spoken to a handful of parents that don't know what's happening. They don't know. I'm afraid that they will find out once they get the letter, you're being reassigned to a different school. Especially the parents that are illiterate on email, computers. What is the communications with those parents? I would like to know. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm not sure. Oh, I thought you were, Matt, I thought you were in the other enrollment priorities. You wanted to speak on boundaries? It's okay. It's just that the cards said enrollment priorities.
I'll take this. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Jeanette.
Thank you. I emailed the trustees earlier just about best data practices. I will now layer on some opinions since I only have 90 seconds. At Bub, using the numbers you have, the current exemptions would grandfather more transfers than neighborhood residents, whether it's current neighborhood or legacy neighborhood. So, just to be clear, these are not forced moves. So families who lived in Bub, either legacy neighborhood or core neighborhood, and then moved out, or who just went to the district office and said, hey, I live in Therakoff and I'd rather attend Bub, they will all be allowed to stay, I believe, under this current plan. So I just want to make sure that's clear to everyone that decision is being made. Also say that if you're making the decision about, how to handle siblings, there's 11 siblings out of 571 current students at Bub who are siblings of 5th graders. And it's like 0.2% of total enrollment. And we're going to ask parents to keep them there 1 year, to get better engaged with their friends, or stay there another year and then pull them out. So 4th graders would be pulled out. We're talking 11 kids across 3 classes. That's like 3 or 4 kids a class. So I would say where this is going, there's a group of 7 people who want to stay. Think about a rule that's like, if there's room, let kids stay for an individual class up to 25 people, as opposed to, trying to move big blocks of people. Thanks.
Did you say 0.2%?
11 out of 571, yeah, 0.2%, I believe.
How about 2%?
Is it 2%? I think you're...
5 would be 1%.
I think you're right.
Okay.
Yep, you're right. You're right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Rudolph, could you
So
comment?
I need to check my numbers as well. Everybody, nobody's perfect.
Okay. Dr. Rudolph, could you answer for me if it is true that a student who lives, say, in the Montaloma boundaries, but applied for an interdistrict transfer to Bub under some of these exemptions would actually stay at Bub in 2019?
Correct. We were instructed to look at transition zone students, not resetting all students. So if you remember in an earlier presentation, when I brought it to you, there are 637 students that are known. They're currently outside of their boundaries. And then there's another, of those, 400 exist within these transition zones. And so the board was very clear that 637 was an untenable number, which is why we've been focusing on transition zone students. We can, however, go back and look at all kids and recalculate the numbers. We just, if that's what the board is desiring, then that's what we'll bring back next 2 weeks from now.
Thank you.
I like to see that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Comment section?
Comments, questions? Who'd like to go first? Ellen?
Yeah, there's one more group of students whose parents we've heard from in emails and in meetings. And I don't know, Dr. Rudolph, if you've done any explicit calculations about this, but you know, there's a lot of conversation about resiliency and excitement, you know, kids moving to a new school, you know, but there's one group of kids that who have IEPs, and we've heard from a lot of those parents via email. And I don't know how many IEP students are involved in any of these calculations, but have you tried working the numbers to see if whether it would be workable to allow students with IEPs to stay at their current school?
So I think there were really two different types of students that we're talking about. So these numbers do not include students that are in what we call special day classes or SDC classes. And so you'll see in some of the data sheets, they'll say excluding SDC. That's what that actually means. Those are students that could be part of the medically fragile classroom. Those are students who may have autism. Those are students who may have Down syndrome. And so those students, under board direction in 2015, we were told to make sure that those programs remained at Huff, Bub, and Landals. And so we are building a brand new medically fragile classroom at Landals. Our mild to moderate class is staying, it's at Bub, and then the next, and Landals program is moving to Huff to make room for the medically fragile class, which is currently at Therakoff in a room that isn't adequate. And so those students will always be exempt under California guidelines, as well as under district policy to remain at their schools. And that is in line with board direction. In terms of students with IEPs, so students can qualify for an individual education program for a lot of different reasons. So for instance, when I was a kid, I took speech, and those services can be moved at every site because we have enough kids that are there. So we haven't been looking at students with IEPs that are not in the SDC classes. So students that are resource, we have resource classes at all of our sites. Students who may get occupational therapy, physical therapy that are not in the medically fragile, or students like myself who may have received speech services at an early age. Those students were not factored into any of these numbers.
Yeah, the parents that we hear from, and I don't know how you would identify those kids or who would do it. And I don't I don't know anything about this, but we hear from parents who say, my child has an IEP and they're emotionally vulnerable. I really don't know what to do with that information.
If they are not certified as emotionally disabled, we wouldn't look at that. So again, those would be the students that we're looking at that speech, hearing, occupational therapy. They require resource classes. They may just have an instructional aid. Those students are not the students that we've been looking at all. So it's hard to determine just because a student has an IEP, whether or not they have an emotional disability also. I mean, we could look up the numbers and bring that back, but to say that every student with an IEP has one, I mean, we have how many students total? So there's 600 students total. We don't even know how many of those 600 are in transition zones. That would take us some time to calculate.
At one point, there was discussion about the potential of a hardship exemption that would be a case-by-case thing that the district would evaluate. And some of these, I mean, are we still talking about that? Because some of these kinds of situations, if it was severe.
Under the Enrollment Priorities Task Force recommendation, which again, the district supports, those hardship cases, we would create a formalized process for those, and those hardship cases would be identified, and those are ones that Mrs. Geisel and I look at, and we make an exception for, as well as their families. So there are some kids who may have an older sibling who are in the medically fragile class. We bring their younger sibling with them to that particular school because that's where their services are. So if there was a hardship like that, we would definitely take into consideration where the services are. And if we needed to service them at a particular school, we would grant that one. But that is on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Other comments, questions, trustees?
I'd like to reiterate what Jose seconded when we had questions a few minutes ago. I'd like to see what the numbers are if all students attending one of the impacted schools revert to their neighborhood school in 2019.
Okay, so we can bring that data back if you, I'm sorry, Kathy, can you do this one more time for me?
That isn't the 634 number?
That is a part of the 634.
It's a subset of that.
So if you were to, nope, other presentation. I'm sorry. Actually, you know what? This would be let's try this one real quick. If not, then this is the one that has a hard reset, which would be even further than that. Try the version 1. Nope. Can I borrow your computer? So we did look at this information, and this has been posted. Oh, no, we want that presentation. And how about this? I'll just open. So this information actually is readily available. If you give me a second, I'll find it. But we can definitely bring it back. because we did look at what the complete reset is. It was, when we discussed it, it was called the complete reset. And that one, I'm trying to think
Let me
which.
just interject that complete reset always sounded to me like every single student who's not in their neighborhood school moves, but like we talked about, I don't see any strong reason to move people out of under-enrolled schools and into over-enrolled schools against their will. If part of the point of doing this is to reduce over-enrollment. So complete reset with the caveat that it applies to the over-enrolled schools. It's the only part I'm interested in. I don't know if anyone on the board wants the quote unquote complete reset, but I don't think it makes a lot of sense to allow students who are neither in the old boundaries or the new boundaries for a school to stay in that over-enrolled school when the other people have reverted to neighborhood boundaries. The other students have reverted to neighborhood boundaries.
So you want to see a reset for the over-enrolled schools?
That's the, yeah, that's
So-
the acute problem that the new boundary lines are supposed to, in addition to finding students for the new Wisman school, also fixing over-enrollment.
Okay, so just to make sure we're on the same page, I would take the students who are out of their current boundary for Huff, Bub, and Landals. And we would total up those particular numbers and look at how many of those kids would actually be impacted by it. So for instance, there are 13 kids who reside in the Castro boundary, but who are attending Bub. Those students would be removed from Bub, and sent back to Castro. Is that correct?
Understood.
That's the data you want to see.
Yeah, the totals for the schools, if that policy were adopted.
All right.
And their grade levels.
Would that include like Romero Act and forced moves? I mean, at one point we were talking about possibly exempting Romero Act. And I know we're getting at the end of that cycle, but then also the forced moved kids.
Okay, so some of this data was already available, and then
Right.
some of this would require. So for instance, we know how many of those students are fifth graders, and you can see that at the bottom of the sheet. I can ask Tony to see if he can get this between now and next Thursday to get us the other kids in grades 2nd, K, and 1.
Why would it be needed by next Thursday?
Because we have to have the board packet out by Friday.
Oh, well.
So in order to.
If you can't get it done by that Thursday, but can get it done after that, it still should be done. Between then and the meeting, right?
Right, but if you want it in the board packet, I have to have it done.
Sure, that's the best.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you can't do that, getting it done after that, but before the meeting is still better than not doing it at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'd rather give them a hard deadline than
Good.
give them
You're-
some
you're-
extra
you drive a
time.
hard bargain. Sure, do that.
Okay. And those are at schools, again, those are at Landos, Bub, and Huff, correct?
Those are the only 3 over-enrolled schools currently, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, those.
Okay.
Were you looking for input on these exemptions, the proposals this evening, or?
This is
I
for-
feel like we're shifting away. I'm not sure quite.
This is for you to discuss, and if there are other things that you want like this, for us to bring back. And then I think this also gives you the opportunity before you vote to have a robust discussion about your thoughts on this, since all 5 of you are here. So I would encourage you to have that conversation, because ideally, the next time you're supposed to take a vote.
We're going to take a vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So can I say, I think the easiest one that I think everyone is in favor of, and I'd like to be able to take that off the table and not spend time on it later, is I and however many others of you am in favor of exemption number 1, fifth graders and their siblings for 1 year.
Sorry, which one did you say?
Exemption 1.
I'm in favor of it as well. I've been deliberating this a lot, and I obviously submitted my written comments that were read aloud during the meeting I wasn't able to attend. And I really have struggled going back and forth with the neighborhood by neighborhood exemptions. And I finally came up with this thought of, if every kid who is in any transition zone going to any different school was standing right before us, how could we describe a policy that would make sense and sound fair to them? Like 10 of you get to stay, but you guys have to go. And that to me sort of sealed it. And I stand by what I said in the last meeting. And I just think that this exemption 1 tries to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish in getting the numbers down at some of our overprescribed schools. It needs to happen sooner rather than later. The YMCAs are impacted. We were required to pay a pre-registration fee this year just to continue to keep our spot. I called the Bub YMCA today. They're encountering similar situation. This has trickle-down effects that I'm not sure maybe were discussed at the last meeting that I wasn't able to take the time to watch the full video. There's teaching teams that could be impacted by our choices. These are groups by grade level that work together. I think exemption 1 gives people and principals the opportunity to plan for staffing and keeping those teaching teams together, because at the end of the day, it's the education that is important, and those teacher teams are invaluable in creating a solid united front, in providing feedback on how well certain things are or are not working. And I think that's something that needs to be considered as well when we're making these kinds of decisions. I know we're not going to make everybody happy. I know I'm probably putting myself out there as a big target holding this opinion. I just don't think a piecemeal approach is fair. I know there's been a lot of commentary about how North Wistman wanted this school, but I can tell you if those kids were in front of this, it's the parents that wanted the school. The kids are perfectly happy where they're at. My son will have been at his school for 4 years. He would prefer to stay, I'm sure, but it was in the best interest of that community and that it's still growing to get this going. They're just approved 400 more units over there. So while I get it's a wildly unpopular opinion, I still hold to it. I'd like to also add that we can keep bringing back data and more data. The EPTF, I believe, spent 20 hours, many members spent many more than 20 hours poring over all of this information. They were selected by groups, by new bounded neighborhoods, so that with equal representation, and they came to a consensus and brought it to us. And I believe at least exemption 1, with the caveat of the siblings, honors both their work and sort of gets us to where we want to be in order to solve these bigger problems. So that's
Can I ask, and I don't mean to usurp your direction tonight, President Blakely, but I'd be interested in hearing from the other trustees just about exemption 1, whether, how many of us support this?
Well, I will just go on record. I have, going back to a year ago, saying I was interested in looking at 4th and 5th. But when I looked at these numbers, that's why the data is helpful. And I see that if we do 4th and 5th, that the new school in North Wistman will start out with an enrollment of only 248 students. My eyeballs popped open when I saw that. I don't think, I mean, that's doable, but I don't think it's the right thing to do. And also when we looked at the numbers of portables, where there's 6 at one school and 5 at another, that also doesn't feel right. The campuses feel very impacted right now under construction with all those portables. So I think based on having more information, I'm now supportive of the 5th and carpooling siblings, which is exemption 1.
Trustee Wilson, how many siblings, how far does the sibling bullet point go for you in exemption 1?
What does
Just
that mean?
1 year.
Oh, for that shoulder year, and I've heard people say that by doing that, we're only looking at the social emotional well-being of the 5th grader and not the sibling. And it's really to facilitate drop off, and those fifth graders will be going to a different school. So in essence, there will be 2 drop offs at some point. Again, single shoulder year, that's where I want to go. And they can opt to just move. And I mean, I don't know it may be depending on the child and that family structure. There may be somebody who has some emotional needs that can't handle the move, or vice versa, that they can make their own decision.
Trustee Gutierrez?
Okay. I'm interested in exemption 1, but it doesn't matter in general how you approach the change, because you're still going to have people that won't be in favor of the change. It doesn't matter which neighborhood you're talking about. It could be a small one, it could be a large one. You'll get all kinds of arguments that are social and emotional related. Some people say don't buy into this issue of resiliency because not other kids have that. Well, welcome to our world, right? I mean, that's what we deal with on a daily basis with all the policies that we talk about at a high level. And how does that impact every single kid? And how does that impact every single family? And how does that impact the teaching crew? And also the community as a whole? Not just our children, but everybody's children. So no matter how we look at this in general, it's not easy, but we understand that and we're willing to raise up to the challenge, right? To meet that challenge. So I like exemption 1, but I also like, frankly, the hard reset. Get it over with. So I'm torn between those 2 approaches right now, because if we give someone 1 year and yet we're talking about social emotional responsibility, hey, change is change. Sometimes you don't have that luxury in a family like Dr. Rudolph knows, or I know, and maybe others as well. Once dad says, hey, I don't have a job, like it happened to us several occasions, I got to go where my parents take me. And I have to adjust. And that's life. So those are my thoughts.
My thoughts are similar. Exemption 1 makes sense to me. I'm not as sure about the sibling thing anymore as I was 2 weeks ago, because that 5th grader is going to be going to some other school just the next year. And honestly, my 5th grader keeps asking to take the bus to school. And so maybe I put too much weight on the idea of keeping a carpool together when really it wouldn't be as bad as I first imagined, to allow for exempting the 5th grader but not anyone else. But back to the hard reset, I always, I guess several different concepts have gone by the name hard reset. I thought one of the hard reset scenario also meant everybody reapply to the choice schools too. I thought that was one type of hard reset, which seemed unnecessarily hard, or like, what's that supposed to do? How's that supposed to help? And so now, Jose, when you say you like the hard reset, is it resetting everyone at the over-enrolled schools or everyone at every school?
Everyone at every school, right?
So then some student that like lives in the new Bub boundaries but wants to go to Castro would have to go to Bub, not be allowed to go to Castro.
Well, see, that's the thing, right? Because I don't know that would actually come up.
Oh, maybe there's no one in this null set. There's a null set.
But it could be, that example could be used in any other school in general. So how would we deal with that? My understanding was, based on Dr. Rudolph's explanation, is that there still could be possibly a case-by-case exemption that would be brought up to the district. But that's another question that I have. Is that something that we're thinking about doing regardless of what we do here, what we implement, or is this a second step, or how does that work in conjunction with what we're trying to do now? And that's a question I have for Dr. Rudolph too, right? So when we talk about the case-by-case exemption, and when people apply for that, is that contingent of what we pass in the end, or how would that work?
Is the case-by-case exemption it's not a current policy, it's a policy we could adopt, correct?
It's a current policy.
Current policy,
and it's one that EPTF recommends that we continue.
It's like a hardship exemption.
Right.
It's not articulated, it's case by case, right?
The only difference is that we would formalize it because there are some parents who are aware and will email me and say, you know, here's my case. And then there are some people who are unaware. And so by creating a formalized process to do it, as well as a form that there's a paper trail, it would enable us to broadcast out that you could apply for hardship under various conditions. And then we could have a paper trail of it. So we would be, it wouldn't be the parents that have the highest social capital who understand how to navigate the system. Any parent would be allowed to utilize this process.
Okay, thank you for the explanation.
Okay, thank you.
I'd also like to say I'm definitely supportive of exemption 4, allowing the under-enrolled students attending, out-of-boundary students attending under-enrolled schools to stay at their school. And I guess you need to reapply each year. And you said if there was a 25% buffer of.
Would we have to implement that if the other EPTF recommendation, because that one has a sunset, and then it sounded to me, unless I misunderstood, that the EPTF has a very similar
They do.
recommendation that doesn't sunset.
Well,
It would, depending on the enrollment.
the distinction of this one, even as one of the parents noted, is that a parent would apply year to year versus you would be exempting all of those students until they matriculate out. So even the kindergartner who enters next year would be exempt. And so you would add 4 more years at the under-enrolled schools. Whereas what the EPTF recommends is that every year staff would re-examine what enrollment looks like. We would identify that school, and then a parent would just need to apply to remain at that school.
Okay.
So it's whether or not you think every parent should have to reapply, or those parents are allowed to remain at the school for the next 4 years. Technically, you could do both if you just wanted to, you know, the parents who are there, let them stay, and you adopt a year to year. That would impact the students who are enrolling in the 1920 school year when the school in North Westman opens. So you could do both, or you could do one. It just, or none.
All right, thank
or
you.
variation. And
Go ahead.
Just real quick, if you exempt 5th graders, and this is, I need to take a couple more kids off of this, but technically your 637 drops down to 374. And then I would need to subtract out the students at Montaloma, Landals, Montaloma, Therakoff, and Castro to see how many of those kids are out of bounds also.
So you're trying to size the impacted school hard reset number?
Yeah.
Which would be 200 or 300.
Right.
or something.
It's going to keep getting smaller if you're only looking at, once you take 5th grade off, that's a pretty sizable chunk. And then once you take those 3 schools off, it's going to get smaller. So I'm just trying to, so you have a little data that you can talk about so you understand it does, taking 5th graders away does make a big difference in the number of students that would move across all schools. And then we would look, there's another spreadsheet that has, I think, the K2 students. We can look at that to tally up the numbers, but it's going to be a lot smaller than the 637. That's right there.
I do have to say that I continue to want to impact as few kids as possible, but within a logical way.
So I want to go back to what you said, President Blakely, about recommending exemption number 4. So I also am in favor of exemption number 4.
I have a question about exemption 4.
Yeah.
And Dr. Rudolph, help me out on this one. So if I understood this correctly, parents in under-enrolled schools would have the chance to still stay at that school, but that's a choice that they still have.
Right, it's optional.
Correct.
If they opt not to stay there and they go to their neighborhood school, or they want to go to their neighborhood school, but that school's still overprescribed, how's
Then
that? How's that gonna? Yeah, how's that gonna play out? If there is no space, depending on what we do in the end,
think we talked about neighborhood schools, right? That was a value of the district. And so, I mean, the whole point of this thing is to allow everybody, to ensure that everybody has a place at their neighborhood school. So even if it's an impacted school, I think we need to allow them to attend their neighborhood school.
So why do they have a choice? Why don't they just go? Why do we give them the choice to stay?
At an under-enrolled school,
Yeah.
I think to fill out the population at that school.
But I get that, but in terms of the spirit of the neighborhood school approach, that's already an exemption.
Yeah, I would say that there are some parents who were moved, and I'll use Montaloma as an example. They were moved to Montaloma because of enrollment one particular year. And then their sibling, because there wasn't space at Huff, right? Then their sibling actually came to Montaloma, and the parent then said, I have 2 kids. I might as well stay at Montaloma. We like it here. So they choose not to go back to Huff, even though the first kid was forced moved. There are some parents, though, because in our current practice, we come back to them first and we ask them if there's space on that grade level. So if you couldn't get in K, in first grade, we'll come back and say, do you want to go back? And some parents choose to go back, then other parents choose to stay. And so I think the purpose of this exemption is to allow those individuals who've already made a conscious choice to stay at Montaloma or Castro or Theracov, for them to simply stay and provide some stability. But what you're now doing is you're providing them with the option to return back to their homes, their neighborhood school, which up until the last 2 years has not been a priority of the district. The district will say there's not enough space, therefore we're not going to accommodate you at your neighborhood school. We now, no matter what, will accommodate them at their neighborhood school. But I do believe that there are parents that will choose to stay at Castro, Montaloma, Theracov, because they enjoy that school. Just as you have parents who choose to stay, they're not at Bub, or they're not in Bub's attendance zone, but they choose to stay there. But you're, as Trustee Blakely said, you're encouraging through choice to go to schools that have space. And I think you'll see some parents will choose.
Okay.
But I will say there are parents who could choose to do this right now and who choose not to. And the reason why they choose not to is because of historical reasons behind a school's performance. And so that is a reality too. That's the flip side.
Okay. And so I bring that up to the team here in general, because I think as we discuss these issues and we have the ability to actually just be honest about everything as best as we can, having said this on the record helps out a lot, because then that way, by hearing these types of explanations, we have a better sense of what we're trying to look at, but then the community also has a better understanding of how do we look at this issue and how do we look at that not as an exemption. The last thing I want is for anyone to think that we're playing favorites with anybody.
I have a couple more things. I don't think we didn't articulate an exemption, or maybe you had already built it in for that Huff triangle that has 7 children to allow them to stay at Huff.
So last board meeting, when we asked about that, it didn't get a majority. Therefore, it wasn't built in. If you would like that to be revisited, then we could easily build that one back in. But at that point, we're looking for board majority to do it. And so it sort of, if I was tallying it right, I think it came down to 2-2.
Okay, I'm interested in that. It's only 7 children. I'm not trying to play favorites, but it doesn't make sense to me to shift them from one impacted school to another when there's only 7 of them.
I got a question for you. Then why even change the boundary there? We could erase that boundary.
I think for going forward,
Well, if it's only 7, I mean, it's not going to be 70 kids the next year. It's still going to be a
we don't know
very-
how many kids there will be. I'm
Well,
not.
That's true. But
Yeah.
they're both impacted. I mean, either side. So why change it? Let me ask you that.
I'm just relying on the work that was done last year. And I'd be willing to grandfather the current kids and then move them after that.
I'm just going on what it sounds like the facts, that it's a
Does anybody
small
else
number of students.
support it? We were running out of time. Ellen does. Is it just Ellen and myself? Okay, then.
Can I ask, related to that, and in my mind, we talked about buffer zones. I don't know what the Enrollment Priorities Task Force is doing. That's separate work from ours. I don't know if they're creating, lists of, priorities. So for example, if someone from the Huff Triangle wanted to apply to remain at Huff under the hardship exemption, is that something that would be considered reasonable? And in my mind, it would. Or if someone from the Willowgate neighborhood wanted to apply to remain at Landals under the hardship exemption, I think that would be reasonable. And in my mind, those are kind of mixed up with, well, we talked about last time about buffer zones, giving some priority to people from different areas of the city to apply to a different school. So for example, to use your Montaloma example, Montaloma and Huff are the schools that are the farthest away from each other versus Bub, which is minutes from Huff. I think if someone from that Bub or Huff triangle applied to Huff, they should have more priority to get into that school than someone from Montaloma. So I don't know if the Enrollment Priorities Task Force is having those discussions, but in my mind, opening up, a flexible interpretation of hardship exemption or some idea of buffers makes sense.
So the task force didn't look at buffer zones, but they did have a very robust debate about whether or not the district was actually committed to making sure that every kid attended the neighborhood school. And that was a large part. One group doubted that we would do this, and another group took us on our word that says, over the last 2 years, the district has shown a commitment to make sure that their kids stay at the neighborhood school. Therefore, we're going to trust it. And what they settled on was that neighborhood schools was the driving impetus for all of this work that has occurred. Therefore, that is the driving factor. And so these boundaries, there are no exemptions for a hardship because you live within a certain distance of a school. The exemptions for hardship deal with IEPs, bullying, Title IX violations, sexual harassment, and things like that. They did not look at, I live close to this particular school, and therefore I could move. And I think part of the rationale behind that is that because we're so many schools are so close, it is really hard to determine which school you would be exempt from. And I think I'll give you two examples. There are individuals who are within Transition Zone 1 who are stone's throw away from Castro, but are zoned to actually travel to Landals. And then Transition Zone 5, depending on which corner of the transition zone you're in, places you at a closer equidistance to
Faircroft, Slater, or Landals.
Correct. And when we looked at this last year with Tony, and he used a half-mile radius or a mile radius, what occurred was so much overlap that it almost didn't make sense to do it unless you want to go into an open enrollment policy. So they did not explore that or talk about it. However, you do have the authority to either empower staff to redo the zones or for you to simply eliminate a transition zone altogether. It would require a 4-person vote to reopen it, which is a supermajority. And then from there, it would require a simple majority to simply pass it.
Well, I have a question, which is, and it's always difficult to throw out hypotheticals when we know the reality of numbers at different schools. But let's imagine that there's a fourth grade class, fourth grade at Landals, and you have 4 classrooms. And there are, you said that the the teacher-child ratio in a fourth grade classroom is 30-1. So you've got 4 classrooms with a maximum of 120 kids, right?
Ideal and maximum.
Okay,
It does
ideal
go-
capacity.
It does go higher.
And
than
let's imagine in some year, in fourth grade, instead of 120 kids who have enrolled, you have 110, or you have 105. So what do we do with those extra spaces? Do we have smaller classrooms, or do we allow parents who want their child to go to that school for 1 year to fill up those classrooms till they get up to 120?
So currently, if you're, I hate to call it a lottery, but if you have, your kids were born in a year where it's just a small population, you just happen to get a smaller class size because that's the group that's coming through. If you're, and we do see this, Huff, Stevenson had the same impact. They had a very large population come through, and because of the funnel that occurs, where you start off at 24-1 and then you expand, what we saw in 4th and 5th grade are class sizes of 34 or class sizes of 36 at particular sites because they chose not to do a combo class. So you do see that, and we do compensate teachers for going over the 30. Once we go over the 1-to-30 ratio, we have to compensate them. So we do see there are some instances where there are some schools at every single site where the class size drops under the 24-1. And then there are some years where the class size actually increases. And it's, we're either doing a combo class or we're doing some variation of it. And that does happen. And Landals, I think, is a prime example. They have a group of kids currently that are going through that are almost 20 kids larger than any other group of kids. And that bubble is actually going through the whole district. So whatever occurred that year, back east, it would be the snowstorm effect. But that's, you do see that from time to time.
Right, but that's the opposite of my hypothetical
Right.
of a fourth grade year
So-
at Landals, where instead of 120 kids, there's 110. So you mentioned a lottery. Do we allow a lottery to fill up those other 10 spots?
The only thing that we do is if a student was outside of their zone because the district practice forced moves, we would allow them the opportunity to return back to the school if they want. But we do not offer up slots at that particular site because every year and sometimes mid-year, we have kids that show up. And so we use that as sort of a buffer. I think Montaloma is a prime example where we have military families who are being stationed at Moffett at some point. And while most of them will come sometime around Labor Day, there are times when they are stationed because of various things. And so we see the transiency there. So we do not allow for families to go on a grade by grade basis.
Okay, we're now 5 minutes behind time. We haven't talked about, it seemed like there was, people were in favor of exemption 1. Is exemption 2 with 4th and 5th grade? Does anybody have anything to say about that? If it's 1, not 2, okay. What about exemption 3 And I would ask you to look at the transition zone 2 if we're looking at Willowgate. Quick, any thoughts on that?
What I could do is I could bring back the numbers for you for zone 2. And since we're looking at what a complete reset is, we can also bring back its impact on for zone 5 too, if you want.
Well, we know that zone 2 is 7 and zone 5 is 24, I believe.
Correct.
Right?
But once you remove the students who are
Well, that's my point.
who are currently outside of the bounds, I mean, we could bring that version back, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Trustees, are you interested in that information, or do you have enough information already?
I'm not sure why we would look at 5 if we're not looking at 2. We've already said not 2, but maybe I'm misunderstood where they were coming from.
Well, you weren't here. It was 2 to 2 on 2. So I don't know how you feel on 2. It's 7 children.
I thought we already.
Well, last time it was 2 of us were in favor of allowing those 7 kids to stay at Huff and 2 were not. You would be the tiebreaker, if you will.
I thought we just did that.
Oh, so you said no. Okay. So, okay.
And I
Okay.
thought now you were doing 5.
Right.
That's my understanding.
Right. But if,
Did I not?
No, I
Okay.
got you.
Okay.
I got the same thing.
yeah. Okay. So
So I'll say if it doesn't, I'm in favor of allowing 2, but because of its small numbers, but if we're not going to do 2 because of small numbers, I don't see doing 5 with its large numbers.
5 means 583 students at Landals and 5 portables, I believe. Was that right?
What?
Quick question, quick question,
If-
Dr. Rudolph.
If Willowgate, if we did do an exemption for Willowgate,
I'm saying no exemption for Willowgate.
you're saying no. I'm just saying if we were to do one, I think it's 583 students at,
If you do 4th and 5th, if you just did 5th grade, it's 565. What we would do is we would bring back
okay.
the numbers, because there was, unless I misread this, sort of a majority about pooling students at the 3 impacted sites of Huff, Bub, and Landals and sending them back to their current neighborhood school. Did I read that correctly?
Say that again?
So I wrote down to look at a complete reset at the over-enrolled schools. Is that, you want us to bring that information back?
That's what Greg and I had. Greg had suggested.
That makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense to me, and
Okay, was there
I don't know why we wouldn't reset students out of all the students out of the over-enrolled schools, besides the ones that are in the neighborhood, except for 5th graders.
Okay, so is there one
I mean,
more?
I'm interested in looking at the data, but I
Okay.
feel like we're going backwards. And I'm also not interested in moving more kids than need to be moved.
But then this is the need to be moved problem, because those schools are over-enrolled. This is the need.
And that's the crux of the issue that we're trying to
Right.
address.
And so like,
which,
I'm not sure how it fell off along the way, but we're trying to make it so that students at Bub and Huff and Landals fit in those schools.
Right.
And leaving out a big population of students that are making it harder to make that math work doesn't make any sense. And I don't think I'm going to support not doing that.
Okay, so what we would do then is we would bring back that data. And then if you wanted to look at, and again, this is if you're saying transition zone 5 for exemption 3, you could add those students back in there if you want to see that data.
well, and that makes it cleaner because then we know what we're dealing with at this point in time.
Correct, because you would be removing any student who is out of the Landals zone. So for instance, there are 402 students that reside in the Landals zone. Currently 180 actually attend. 82 are at Bub, that's transition zone 1, so that's Shoreline West. But you would then take 16 kids away, 5 from Huff, so you're at 21. Montaloma, 23. So 29 kids would be removed. Just looking at this.
I can't see the numbers, but you just mentioned the Montaloma kids. How do they play into this? They live in the Landals boundaries?
There are, oh, sorry, I did it backwards. So currently attending Landals, there are 2 kids who live in the Bub Zone, 11 in the Castro, 14. So we would take those kids out and we would give you the brand new number of what that looks like.
Will that cause us at the end of the day to be moving more kids?
Until we run the numbers, I wouldn't be able to answer that one.
The point is to move enough kids out of over-enrolled schools until they're not over-enrolled. That's the point. And so those kids need to move to solve that problem.
So we can bring back that data for you.
Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion on this topic this evening?
Do we have a consensus on number 4?
That's the under-enrolled.
Yeah.
I'm in favor of exemption number 4.
And as am I.
I think I'm in favor of both that exemption number 4 and the enrollment priorities.
Agreed.
Exemption or policy as well.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So what we will do is we will bring you back a menu of items to look at, and then probably what will end up happening is you'll probably vote one by one in terms of exemption, whether you like it or not.
Oh, well, we'll like it.
I hope so.
We have to stand by our decision.
I
Simple as
hope
that.
so. Okay.
Okay, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is the Enrollment Priorities Task Force recommendations.
Okay.
Dr. Rudolph?
I'm still here. Sorry. All right. So we
excuse me,
are.
at some point before the end of the evening, I'd like to take a break. So I'd like you to take a look at where in the agenda you think a 5-minute break would make sense.
Well, we're way over. I don't know.
I'll fly through.
We're
this.
15 minutes behind.
Okay. I'll try to fly through and then, all right, so final recommendation for administrative regulation 5115, enrollment priorities. All right, so this is too close. Okay, so again, we're trying to finalize the boundaries. I'm going to skip through this for the sake of time. Again, we want to create a policy, and so we have 26 priorities. Some of this is a reiteration, and they're complicated, and we need neighborhood schools. What's the direction? And so our current reality is that we have boundaries that support board direction. Our current enrollment priorities support more of a choice model where parents are allowed to opt to go to different schools. And we have several sites that are at capacity, which necessitates the implementation of new boundaries. So we are, the structure of the enrollment priorities task force, as Trustee Wilson stated, was that we have a representative from every single attendance boundary, one from the middle schools as well as one from choice schools. So every single school is represented. And then we also have staff, some of whom are here, who also participated. So every school had a staff member, whether it was a teacher, principal, self coordinator, instructional aide, someone was a part of it. And then they also had a parent who represented. So we had 2 representatives from every single school. And then those 2 groups actually created 2 working groups. And at the last meeting, so they had 2 working groups, and then eventually they came up with one recommendation, which I'm going to talk about now. We also did feedback. We met with DAC, DLAC, and focus groups. And so some of this is a reiteration, but there was a concern about exemptions existing across all groups. There's a lot of mixed emotions. Everyone acknowledges with so many requests, no one's going to be happy. No, not everyone's going to be happy. And so their original recommendation had positives and negatives. And in some cases, the creation of a new AR was the amalgamations of both recommendations was what was suggested. And one point was brought up is that this process has been going on for 3.5 years and counting. So this isn't really being sprung on individuals. We've had a lot of conversations about it. And some people would argue that we're at the point of spinning our wheels. So I'm gonna skip past the first two recommendations, and I'm gonna jump exactly to what the EPTF agreed on. And this is conceptual, so we will need to spend some time drafting the official language. But the first priority are for students who reside in the neighborhood school's boundaries. They will be admitted into their neighborhood school, and they have first priority across the board. And the second priority is that staff who are working as at least a half-time FTE, which is a full-time employee, or greater, would be allowed to bring their kids to school. However, they cannot displace a neighborhood student, so space must be available at the site. They did agree as a group that they would allow voluntary transfers to our under-enrolled schools. We asked what the percentage would look like. For the most part, they were in favor. They actually said there wasn't a real decision about what 10% or 25%, but eventually they just said 25% seems like a doable number, and they settled there. But that it would be on a year-to-year basis, and it does not apply to siblings, which means that if you enrolled your kids, you would have to apply for both kids. And so a real good conversation about if you're choosing to go to a school that you're not zoned to, you're making a conscious decision to take a kid. You need to make a conscious decision to take both kids, and not just one and expect for them to be exempt the whole time. Special circumstances will also be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Instances of bullying, special education placement, especially for siblings, Title IX violations, etc. And we will create a new formalized process to be created. Then students whose families move out of an attendance zone prior to the end of the year will be allowed to remain there until the end of the school year. One thing that is not captured in here is that staff is planning on doing attendance verification at impacted sites in the 1920 school year. So that way we would be able to enforce this and also check. So we do have some indication of whether or not a kid has moved, but we will have to either deploy someone or hire someone to go out and do attendance verification. And Mrs. Geiso and her team have already looked at what other districts do in terms of enforcing it, including Palo Alto, Sunnyvale, Santa Clara. And so we would employ something that is similar there. So choice schools did come up. One thing that they would like is that all incoming students must attend an information night prior to entering the lottery as a requirement. And so that conversation came up because they felt like that would, A, make sure that parents were making an informed choice, and B, it actually forces the district to make sure that we are doing outreach to every single community to have enrollment at those sites. So those sites, Stevenson and Mistral, would need to have an information night in every single attendance zone or something similar in order to encourage more diversity, because we felt like there wasn't enough information. And then there was a conversation about looking at choice schools, and there was a debate about siblings. Some people feel like it gives a priority if you have a sibling. Other people felt like, but it should be treated as a homeschool. What I would say is that what former trustee Lambert said, who's on the task force, he said, for this whole time, we have not engaged the two choice schools. And so to spring any type of big changes on those two schools in terms of siblings or in terms of diversity or anything else, it's not really fair because everybody's been focused on the neighborhood schools. And even the one group that looked at this noted that they haven't even had the opportunity to look at it because they were focused on how do we implement neighborhood schools, which was really the driving direction. And so further discussion and study is needed in order to increase diversity at those schools. And I will say that really the diversity conversation stems at Stevenson more than it did at Mistral. But I think there is a definite need to make sure that every community has an equal opportunity to get into one of the two choice schools if that's a desire of a parent. So we would need to look at that a little bit further. So essentially, what EPTF is recommending and what staff agrees with and recommends, and what you can debate about and that we will bring back for a final vote is priority 1 goes to students who reside within the attendance zone. Priority 2 goes to staff. We will allow interdistrict transfers, voluntary transfers to under-enrolled schools or for special circumstances. And we will allow for students who move out of an attendance zone to remain at their particular school. And choice schools, we're making a requirement that every single parent who applies to a choice school attends at least one of the information nights, which means that we will need to do more than one to make sure that we have equal access for all of our families. And then there's a possibility of further discussion about how do we promote diversity at both of the choice schools.
And when you said students that move out of the zone can stay at their school, that's for the balance of that school year, correct?
That is only for that
Right,
particular school year, yes.
Thank you. Any other clarifying questions, trustees? Okay, I believe we had 2 members of the community that wanted to speak on this topic, although Matt, 3. Matt, did you still want to speak on this one, or did you make your comment last time? Okay, so we've got Matt Grunwald, Christine Caslow, Rich Tanner. Okay. And David Levin. We're really running late tonight, so I'm going to ask you each to keep your comments to 2 minutes. So Matt.
Yep, thanks. Just quickly, I just think there needs to be more detail on the actual, this is meant to be, I believe, a stack rank of who, the priority with which people get to enroll. And in a future state where you do have, Huff will always be oversubscribed. Bub will have capacity. You want to move people, or some people want to move from that neighborhood into another one. First, yes, people who live in that neighborhood. Then the next one was people who,
FTEs, yeah.
Yep, staff. And then where do siblings fall in? What about people who are transfers and then siblings of transfers? Within transfers, who gets to transfer? Is it people in the legacy boundary, people who are nearby, siblings of a former transfer? I think those are all things that need to be considered and thought out more. And then lastly, I'll say that for the same reasons that people wouldn't choose a choice school if siblings weren't guaranteed, I think you'd have the same situation with transfers. So I do believe in the future you're going to want transfers to be able to balance out schools, to keep the boundaries longer and let them last longer. Thanks.
Thank you. Christine?
Yes, hello. I'm Christine Caslow. I am the co-chair of SELPA 1 CAC, which is a special education community advisory committee. I'm also a founding member of the Learning Challenges Committee. Both of these groups work with families whose children receive special education services or have learning challenges. And I'm also here because I lobbied the board several years ago to make sure that special education students who were in special day classes were not moved from campus to campus over and over again, as my son was and many others were in the past. And I am very encouraged by the building that's being done of new special day classes, and that the commitment that the board hopefully will continue to follow through with, that students are not moved constantly. But the district also has put forth a commitment to inclusion, or moving more and more children who receive special education services out of special day classes and into the general education environment as much as possible. We're seeing wonderful results with inclusion. I am very supportive of inclusion. But we need to incorporate inclusion into this particular enrollment priorities, because as you move a child who may start off in kindergarten in a non-neighborhood school because they're at a special day class, we're seeing this right now. I have several families who are having this problem now, not after this, but right now, where their child is now being moved into general education, sometimes with an aide, but they were in a special day class. They're doing great, but their neighborhood school is across town, and they're being told that, oh, well, if you move into general ed, you have to go to your neighborhood school. And I moved every 3 years as a kid. I know what it's like, and I survived and I thrived. But kids who have special needs, I see what it did to my son. It broke him. Okay, so if you, I would like that if there is a special circumstance, that there's a formal process of hardship, that kids with special education be considered as on a case-by-case basis, and especially to promote the success of inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Rich?
Hi, my name is Rich Tanner, and I was on the ETF, and we wasted so much time on other things. Seriously, we were completely in disarray and no consensus going on for anything related to the choice schools. So I'm very grateful to Dr. Rudolph that he suggested we continue as a group or some reshaping of the group in the fall or maybe in the summer to discuss that. In the past, Stevenson has made some efforts to reach out to other parts of the community and get draw more people to come to information nights. And it's been a dismal failure because in the past, we have not had any support on this from the district in these attempts. We've had informational nights that were specifically set up for Spanish speak. The only people speaking the presentations were speaking in Spanish, and we had like one family show up. Dr. Rudolph and I have talked about this a number of times, and I believe we're going to make a real successful effort this time. And the idea of having presentations at each of the school zones, as you can imagine in the past, probably would have met with a good deal of resistance from each of the schools to have a choice school come there and say, hey, consider the choice schools as well. But hopefully we can get past that resistance. And one of the things I'd like to consider that I've also talked with Dr. Rudolph about is to get more diversity into the choice schools, to find out what the people who are not applying see as a barrier and find ways of lowering the barrier. We have a new preschool that's on the campus now that wasn't there before. Maybe something we can do that attracts more people that way. We are going to have more rooms than PACT has ever had before. So maybe more after school program, maybe more transportation, maybe more organization, carpools. We're really good at organizing things. So I think the idea of magneting people is going to work a lot better.
Thank you, Rich.
Information.
David?
Thank you, trustees. My name is David Levin. I'm the parent of a first grader at Landals. I would urge the board to take this enrollment priorities and the subject of intra-district transfers as an opportunity to correct some mistakes or some problems with the boundaries that were drawn. There's been a lot of talk about neighborhood schools, but there are two zones that are not zoned for their neighborhood schools. Transition Zone 1, the folks that live near Castro, Castro is the neighborhood school, not Landals. Likewise, my neighborhood, Transition Zone 5, our neighborhood school, by all accounts, is either Slater or Landals. So what I would ask the board to do would be to consider as a basis for an intra-district transfer, if your neighborhood school is not your geographic neighborhood school and you want to go to your geographic neighborhood school, you should be allowed to do that. That would allow students in Transition Zone 1 to go to Castro if they want, and Landals, Willowgate students to go to Landals. The goal is neighborhood schools which would be walkable and bikeable, and not what the current boundary lines as currently drawn would reflect for those two neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustees, thoughts or questions for Dr. Rudolph or thoughts on the proposal?
I have a thought. On this page, in small italics, it mentions that under-enrolled schools are schools that, lower than 25% of their capacity. I feel like we need to also add to that I don't think we should fill the last seat in a grade with an intra-district transfer, that we should only allow transfers in, like say in Trustee Wheeler was talking about, there's 120 students in this, four, what were they, fourth grade classrooms or something. We shouldn't let an intra-district transfer into there and be the 120th student, in my opinion. That we, in addition to the school being under-enrolled in the aggregate, that grade should be under-enrolled as well. A full grade will create a problem for us if we make it a right to transfer into there. Then we'll be stuck. So I think we need to add that it needs to be both of those situations.
That makes sense to me, that you want to leave a little bit of room because people move in the middle of the school year. But I'm generally in favor of the proposals.
Me too.
I'm in favor too. I'm just curious, is there a vision yet for this new formalized application process for this case by case?
We would need to.
Still in the planning phase.
We haven't even got to that part. That's over the summer support.
Okay.
So
Got it.
yeah, and if you want us, if one more of you agree, then we can add that the grade level space too.
I agree.
Okay.
Yes, you got 3 at minimum, so I think that's all you need.
Yeah, just we'll make that edit. Is there anything else you want us to? I mean, you can technically add anything under special circumstances, and if there's space, we can. It'd be a yes or no. So is that where you want to stop?
Ellen, did you have any thoughts?
I've said what I thought.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just go with what we have so far.
Okay.
I don't,
Okay.
Okay.
You don't like the if the grade also has space proviso?
No, we're going with that approach.
Oh,
right? We already
okay.
have- we already
What we have
3.
so far,
plus
that plus that
yes.
thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
And no
then I
matter
think-
what, the voluntary transfer, all of this would be an application process.
Right. And then later on, once you have the process nailed down, and I'm sure you'll give us an update on what that looks like and what it'll
Yes.
entail and where to find that on the internet. And
At the start of the school year, once we have it all built, we'll be able to bring it back and say, this is what it looks like.
And I would just like to thank the Enrollment Priorities Task Force. I know it's been a long slog, and we appreciate the work that you've done.
Yeah, I would concur with that. The teachers, both parents, some parents have been working on this for 3 or 4 years. So they did a yeoman's job of getting us to this point. And I know we spun our wheels a couple of times and sort of meandered down the road, and it's great that we got to this point.
The next item on the agenda is the name for the new school on North Wisman Road. And okay, you're just going to take your own break. That's great. Dr. Rudolph, are you the one that is presenting on this?
I am. This is it. And then you can get rid of me. Okay.
We're not going to get rid of you.
So naming of the new school on North Wisman Road. So the context is that this is one of the board goals that we have. We wanted to look at, and I brought this to you earlier, the naming of a facility which falls under board policy 7310, which means that we can look at individuals living or deceased, entities that have made outstanding contributions, financial contributions to the communities, people who have made contributions statewide, national, or worldwide significance, and then the geographic area in which a school or building is located. And then there was a suggestion for Jose Antonio Vargas as one of the names. And then we talked about the new school can't be named Slater or Wisman. These are existing school sites. I know that they have existing CDS codes. There's been some comment about, no, you could easily port the name over and change the school. You could, but I would probably venture to argue that it is possible that Slater in some type of fashion will open again, just because of the East Wisman project that is coming. And so if we cannot find a solution within East Wisman, we will need to probably create 2 grade level schools on that site, one to house older kids and one to house younger kids. So we want the flexibility to keep that name. Otherwise, we'll be back here renaming a school later on. And then the other part of this is that staff believes, and this is what we've said, that at the same time, it's one thing to, when you are raising a school, you simply reuse the existing name. In this case, the school in North Westman is a brand new school that is adjacent to the Slater campus, which makes it a different context. And then obviously we know that names bring emotional reactions when they are new. And so we did community input. We mailed postcards, we did social media, websites, and we also we focused in on the Slater neighborhood to get feedback from them, but we also opened it up to the whole district. And then we asked, what are the important attributes and contributions of a potential namesake? We had 320 people participate who shared 7,057 thoughts. And then of those, 137 were actually resided within the Slater neighborhood. And so the thoughts that they came up to is that the name should be reflective of the values the school stands for. We want the school to be inclusive, innovative, and diverse. So diversity came up as the top theme. And we want a leader who is authentic and fearless and cares about every individual, regardless of race, culture, and religion, a person of good character, a role model, someone who has made a difference in this world, someone the children can admire for their hard work, strength, and accomplishments. And then it came up as many of the big names in technologies are dropouts. For elementary school, we should pick a namesake who actually values and encourages education. And so what we realized that some of the most important qualities, community buildings, respect for diversity, and inclusion were sort of the big names. And the top thoughts did not differ significantly between the district as well as the individuals who reside in what used to be the Slater neighborhood boundary. And then there was a strong support for someone who is significant or successful in education. And so the names that were suggested, Michelle Obama Flotis, Gail Urban Moore, who is a former board member, and we had Jose Antonio Vargas, who's a former student from Mountain View and a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. Grace Hopper, who is one of the inventors of the computer. I believe she's Colonel Grace Hopper. President Barack Obama, and then Ruth Close Chance, who's a philanthropist from California. And so we had already set up the focus group. One of the good things about having the Enrollments Priorities Task Force is that we had focus groups from that area already, and they graciously agreed to volunteer or to be part of this process. And so we sent them information about each name, and we included background information about the person. And so we had, and I have to say, one of the names was actually left off, Ms. Klaus. It was an error on our part. It wasn't intentional, but she did not make the list when we sent this back out. So we had them rate the following individuals: Grace Hopper, Gail Urban Moore, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, and Jose Antonio Vargas. And so the top 2 names that came, and I guess how I should say these names came about, these were actually names that were suggested through that came through from a community member. Actually, all of them came from a community member or from the Board of Trustees. So these were names, even though we, and I will say there were community members that also put Jose Antonio Vargas in, but when we did the poll, we actually pulled the names out and held them in the background so that people wouldn't vote on particular names. So when we went out to the focus group and we asked staff to rank the names, the top 2 vote getters, it was a tie, Jose Antonio Vargas and Barack Obama. I think they were rated for 2 completely different reasons. And I think that's worthy. Jose being a student who went to school here and having ties, and then Barack Obama obviously being a former president of the United States. And then right behind there was Michelle Obama, Gail Urban Moore, and then Grace Hopper. And we included the votes. And so what staff is recommending for you to deliberate on, and then eventually vote at the next meeting, is that the new school on North Westman go to Jose Antonio Vargas. The preschools, since there are two of them, you can either do a combination name or you can do one big name, Barack and Michelle Obama Preschool, and then it would be at Montecito or at Latham. And then we would rename the boardroom the Gail Urban Moore Leadership Center in recognition of her work as a trustee, to remind us all about being dedicated to the students. Because I believe she and her daughter's here, and I know I should know this number, but it was 838 meetings in a row that she attended. And so we thought that that would remind us why we were here and to be dedicated. And then also she was also part of the opening of the MURs at the school. So it's just a good reminder. But this is staff's recommendation to the Board of Trustees. As usual, you can move, change, punt, kick, whichever way you want to go.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. Any clarifying questions, trustees? Okay, we have one member of the community. We have two members of the community, Holly Leonard and Matt Grunwald, who wanted to speak on this. And just because it's getting to be so late, I would encourage you to try to keep your comments concise. Thank you. And I'm going to let Holly go. Okay, Matt, you're there. Go.
This is completely superficial. I don't know Mr. Vargas. I think I just Googled it, and there is a Vargas Elementary 2.1 miles away in Sunnyvale. So, in a Google world where everyone's trying to find this place, and there's already probably school ratings for it, things like that. I think it's something that should be considered.
I think there's one in Cupertino too. Thank you. Ms. Leonard.
Yes, Holly Leonard here, daughter of Gail Urban Moore. There isn't a Gail Urban Moore school 5 miles away. There you go. There. But I would just like to acknowledge to the board that it's an honor to have my mother's name as a candidate here, serving under this community for the 29 years that she did. You all know the commitment, and I'm just honored that her name's up for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustees.
I'd like to talk. I agree with all of these recommendations. I think it's very elegant that the staff came up with this Leadership Center name after Gail Urban Moore. They're more creative than I am, so I appreciate that. I am a huge fan of Barack and Michelle Obama, and I'm very glad of the recommendations for preschool. And I am a huge fan of Jose Antonio Vargas, and I am in favor of naming our new school that. And I think I know how people refer to schools over time. I think if we make an effort to continue to say Jose Antonio Vargas, and his name is so prominent locally and internationally that there won't be any confusion, or at least J.A. Vargas, but that Jose Antonio Vargas, it's extremely meaningful to me that he's kind of a local boy does good story, and he's inspirational, very accomplished Pulitzer Prize winner, to be able to have a local connection to someone of this stature, and all the causes that he advocates for. I think I am very much in favor. I was speaking to a couple other people last week, and I was expressing some cynicism that we'd be able to actually get names of this level of meaning all the way through the process. I thought we'd end up with some really bland names so that they wouldn't be objectionable to anybody. But I will say I'm very much in favor of each of these recommendations.
So, Dr. Rudolph, trustees, I like the recommendations here. Jose Antonio Vargas is someone who's very, as you said, well respected. But I'd just like to say that it's more reflective of the times that we live in as well, right? And the life cycle of a school district evolves throughout time. And before we had Mariano Castro, which represents something else. Now we have the juxtaposition in modern times with Jose Antonio. And I like to basically say it's about time. You have to recognize the greatness in people, and when they're different that way, and children look at it from a perspective of hope, that's what education, I think, is for all of us here on the board, and that's why we ran for these positions, because we still believe in that hope. President Barack Obama and Michelle, they've done wonders for preschool education. So from that perspective, that's I'm very happy about that. Not because I'm a progressive or a Democrat, or it's just because you see for yourself how much time they put in to developing this type of approach to education throughout the states. And unfortunately, when administrations change, priorities change, and we don't see that now. And I think now more than ever, we need to recognize that it starts early and that we can make that difference earlier. And that by having this type of name association to the schools, which are highly rated now, the preschools, this is a model for what you can do. And this is an example of how we evolve. And I thank you for that.
Well, I agree with what both trustees Wheeler and Gutierrez just mentioned. I'm also really excited and thrilled that the community rallied behind the Vargas name as well. I wasn't sure, having been the person who proposed it, how that would how it would go over. And I just think, again, it's a sign of the times. And this is really exciting. And I agree with these recommendations. I don't have anything more substance.
I feel a little uncomfortable naming a school after someone relatively young and alive, because even schools named after people that have lived their lives and passed away, in Palo Alto, they're renaming the schools because they found out things that happened, like that were fine 50 years ago or whatever. People didn't mind so much 50 years ago, and then values change. When the person's still alive and still has maybe 50 years more living to do, I feel like it puts the students in that school in an awkward position to have to feel like anything done by this living person reflects on them. And I don't feel very comfortable with that.
Can I say, you just almost contradicted your own point.
Go ahead.
Because even deceased people, as we have seen in the last couple of years, even deceased people are given different opinions in different periods of history. So even if we named a school after a person, sometime in the future, some future people may think worse of that person. So I don't think living or dead makes a difference, other than if you're dead, there's nothing else that you could do that's questionable, whereas if you're alive, you could still do that. But I think the distinction between living and dead isn't meaningful.
Hear that sentence, that last sentence? Yeah, I think the distinction between living and dead is meaningful, but like the fact that I don't see it as a contradiction. The fact that people that are done doing things, opinion can change on them, means that you have to be real careful, even picking among deceased individuals to name your school after. And the risk is much higher when there's someone who could still do things. Who knows? All sorts of things. Yeah, so I'm not comfortable with it.
I have great confidence in Jose Antonio Vargas. I find him just inspirational, and I'm so proud of what he's done. My son went to Mountain View High School and was in the choir for 4 years, and Jill Denny is the choir director there. And she was one of the first people who helped him. He was in the choir about 8 years before my son was. And the choir travels internationally usually every year. And he found out that he was not here legally when he went to get his driver's license. He didn't know that. And he went with this confession to tell Jill, and she said, well, we're going to go to Hawaii this year instead. And I mean, he's had support from our community members, and he took that support. The former principal at Mountain View High sponsored him to go to college. You know, he was a journalist with the Mountain View Voice. And he took, you know, that education that he got here in Mountain View and became a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, and then a real fighter for freedom, especially for the Dreamers. And I'm proud of that legacy. Sure, he could mess up, we all could, but I have great confidence in him. I'm not concerned so concerned that I wouldn't want to name a school after him. I think the motivation that he could give our kids is just wonderful. They could see themselves in him, and if he can do it, they can do it. So I'm really happy with that. I also am proud. I've heard great things about Holly's mother, Gail Urban Moore, from neighbors on Lola Lane, and I'm proud of her too. I like the idea of naming a leadership center after her. But I will also say we're likely to open new schools in the future, so there may be more school naming opportunities down the road. And I'm very much in support of naming the preschool the Michelle and Barack, or Barack and Michelle Obama preschool. So,
No, I agree. And I think, I mean, I could tell you in the last 2.5 or 3 years, well, we've been on the board. I would love for Jose Antonio to be back on the Mountain View Voice. I mean, the whole, having said that, thank you, Dr. Rudolph.
Yeah. I just want to just add as I close out for the day, this really is an impressive group of individuals. Anytime that you're considered in the same running as a former president speaks volumes to your contributions to a particular school district. And so whether it's the Leadership Center and 838, I feel like I just messed up that number again. But whether it's the Leadership Center or whether you are a former student, it really is an impressive field. And I think each individual in their own right has contributed in some type of fashion to this district or to some type of larger conversation. And so I was really pleased with how this came out. And I think each one is going to be a great namesake and a great reminder about what we need to do or what values we need to strive for. So I just want to close with that.
thank you. And trustees, I would note that we have 21 minutes before 10 o'clock. We still have a fair number of items that I think can't be deferred to the next meeting. So do I have a motion?
So
to
I've
extend?
done the math here on my paper. I'm going to move that we extend the meeting till 11 o'clock.
Dr. Rudolph, which, if any, of the items that remain on the agenda are required to be handled tonight?
And technically you can do A at the next meeting. Or do we need A now?
Which one's A?
The resolution for summer
That has to be
construction
done.
contracts.
Yep. The only thing that on mine is the deferred maintenance plan. That's the only thing that can be pushed.
Can we push that to do we have time at the next meeting? It's pretty full too.
It is, but it depends on how quick we go.
I think that the deferred maintenance plan is going to be very quick.
This will be
no?
very fast.
I will second trustee Wheeler's motion, but I hope that we can get out of here by 10:30. But we need a third in order to move forward.
Third.
Thank you, Dr. Clark.
Abstain.
Me too.
I'm sorry, Jose.
The deferred maintenance plan,
Thank
the highlight version.
The very fast version. So back in the day, pre-recession, deferred maintenance was the general rule that school districts contributed 3% of the general fund expenditures to Fund 14. To fund deferred maintenance projects, really more so, not so much deferred projects, but more so scheduled maintenance projects for the future. And they were required to do 5-year plans. So what we did as part of the strategic plan It's actually listed in the strategic plan that we will create a deferred maintenance plan to address midterm goals. So we're working with using the state's template of 12 areas for deferred maintenance. This includes classroom lighting, electrical, floor covering, HVAC, lead, painting, paving, et cetera. Working with input from the maintenance staff, also Greystone West, and using the document that they did as part of the creation of the overall Measure G plan. Then using the facilities inspection tool that we did in summer of 17, we created a draft plan. So the plan itself, essentially, that is the summary page of all the items. You see down the left side, that's the project category, the number of projects or sites that will be over the next 5 years, and then the 5 years, 2018, 19, all the way to 22, 23. And you can see a summary of each year, the total cost by category. And then if you go into, and stay on that, the very first year, 2018-19, there aren't any expenditures planned. We've done a lot of work in recent years with Measure G, also the COP, what we're doing at Stevenson at upcoming Slater, the district office. So we've addressed a lot of those issues. But if you go through the second year, a little over $1 million to do some of the projects that we put off over the past work. And then of course, those values go out or fluctuate as the years go on. And then we go by school, by specific projects. So there's asbestos and you see nothing there. There's no plan to remove. There's only a couple sites that still have anything left. And as long as we don't do any work there, which we're not planning any work, it's encapsulated so we don't have to touch it. But as we go through the project, classroom lighting, and you can see that one of the first things is electrical, Graham and Crittenden. We did a lot of surface conduit work when Graham and Crittenden were doing their modernizations. So the thought was probably in the next 3 to 5 years, we may have to go through and kind of touch that stuff, touch up the work that we've already done there. But the majority of work is stuff that we've already addressed in the project over Measure G. HVAC is a huge one. That's in those 4th and 5th year. When we did the HVAC assessment for Measure G, most of our devices were in that, still had that 10 years, maybe 12 years left. When we get to the 21, 22, 22, 23 school year, those devices are going to start to fail. So the idea is to come in with major projects at those school sites that you see over those 2 years to replace them. So that essentially is, as we just go through the rest of the projects themselves. Underground tanks, we don't have anything, goodness. We don't have to worry about that. And then wall systems, this is more cubicles and the workstations that people have. We're about to, what we have at the school sites, we're about to do offices for the projects that we're doing already. The district office is probably the biggest user of a wall system, a cubicle workstation area, and we're doing the new district office next year, so you don't see any plan in the next 5 years. So the impact itself, we've spent millions of dollars with Measure G. The idea investing in the school district without continued regular maintenance, that lifespan of those facilities will be cut short. It will, of course, be more expensive to repair or replace in the future. The financial impact, you can see that year 1 is 0, year 2, 1.2, 350,000, 2.3, 2.3 for years 4 and 5. Of course, not maintaining those facilities could lead to more expensive potential funding sources, which we have not identified yet. Could be current Measure G contingency funding that we have. Unrestricted reserves could be a use of that money as well. And then a combination of sources, A and B and something else that we haven't thought of yet. Extra money coming from maybe the state, the discretionary money that's coming for this year in the 18-19 school year is more than we thought. Funding sources could be decided in the next year, 19-20, to come back in the fall to look at possible sources and funding. So the deferred maintenance plan is really a guidebook. It really is not set in stone. It's not something that we have to do, but it is a good guide for us to do. So we can change it, we can alter it, we can move things up, we can push things back. We can come into a windfall of cash and decide to do some of the projects earlier, or we could, conversely, which most school districts did during the recession, is we pushed off those projects out into outer years and used that money for operational. So we recommend that we discuss that 5-year plan, and then we'll come back on June 14th for adoption. Thanks.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions, trustees? Members of the public?
I have one quick question. For Graham, for the gym, commencement's going to be there tomorrow. If it were a hot day, does the AC work?
Isn't that the city? Does the city operate that?
We share that. They maintain, we share the cost.
Okay.
So,
just an idea. Maybe we can get into some sort of discussion to see if they can help us sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we've already we brought up the sound system. So we've brought up the sound system as well as AC as possible joint expenditures for the city, and that's to look at. The city, of course, depending on what day it is, it says we either have funds or we don't have funds, or they need to budget it. So I think it will be a budget, an item that they can put in their future budget that we would look at. So it is one of the items that's on there. And I think on the BAS, it actually is a below the line item currently.
Yeah.
Thank
For
you.
the sound system.
Thank you. Any members of the public wishing to comment? Any further comments or questions, trustees? Thank you. I'm glad we're doing this. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the local control accountability plan.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to ask that the board hold a public hearing to receive any further comments on the local control accountability plan. This is a requirement to happen before approval, which will be coming to you on June 14th. The LCAP has been presented to the District Advisory Committee and the District English Learner Advisory Committee, and written responses to their comments and questions have been provided already. And the LCAP has been posted on the website since May 10th. We have collected some comments through the website, and as soon as the public hearing's over, I will close the comments on the website and we'll be posting responses to those and any collected tonight tomorrow.
Okay, so do I?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at 9:48 p.m., we are opening the public hearing on the local control accountability plan. Are there any members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Do I close it now or do the trustees speak first?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We don't have your card, so just say your name and give us the cards later. And there's 5 of you speaking? So can we do 2 minutes each?
My name is Monica Teicher, and on the agenda, the item on the LCAP, I was a little concerned that for Graham, since we've seen increasing issues, I guess disciplinary issues at school, I don't think that the current, even though it's in the LCAP to review and decide on the measures for disciplinary measures that do not include suspension, I really want to encourage to tighten up the measures for discipline, because so far they've been having like a slap on the wrist and some talk to somebody and maybe a meeting with a counselor or something. But ultimately, disciplinary issues are escalating at Graham. So I think the measure needs to be tighter and even include put back suspension on the plate if necessary. I know they're trying to minimize the amount of lost educational time, or switch it to some mandatory course or something in those days that they would be suspended, bring it to school and have them do some, I don't know, intensive training, either academically or in social, emotional well-being. Also, I think we would need a little more supervision or more help for the at-risk students in the Graham population. I think that for the second goal, which is to better serve the language English learners, there's not enough personnel really to cover those needs for the population existing at Graham, and it's supposedly increasing for next year. Having just one community engaging facilitator, I don't think is enough for an unresponsive middle school population. At elementary school, it's fine to have one because parents come and drop the kids off and you have a face-to-face. At middle school, that's lost.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Jeanette Campos, and I second what Monica said. I just believe that whatever was working in the past with the increase of students, and it looks like there is more students coming in next year, um, the solution has to be different. There has to be something where I strongly believe that bringing even security cameras will be something that I would like to see. There is those blind spots where personnel is not aware of, and things do happen. Also, the extra support within the school. I was aware now that there's only 3 to 4 yard duties for so many students. I would like to see more input, especially at Graham, since I'm at the Graham community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Maribel Barajas. Good night, everyone. The first day of 2018-2019, I would like to know all if you have planned for us, like our parents and our students around, how we are going to have better supervision, more personnel outside, because we don't have enough personnel, only 3 persons for 900 students, that's not enough. Also, they give it to us one psychology, but that's not enough. We have a lot of issues. And my personal opinion, I went so many times to the office and I see so many Latino parents, they waiting for person to help in. They need to wait in 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or they just left because we don't have enough personnel. And at some point we need to have more personnel because our kids need more supervision, and we need to find all of you, you're not here in the school, but our kids talk, and if they have time for put cameras or get more people. If you have more budget, it's possible getting more personnel because it's not enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Muy buenas noches. Mi nombre es Marilu Cuesta.
Good
Ten-
evening. Good evening. My name is Marilu Cuesta.
Tengo 4 hijos y mi niña está aquí en 7º grado en Graham.
I have 4 children, and I have a daughter here in 4th grade at Graham.
Tengo la
7th grade.
Tengo la fortuna de conocer al hijo de la señora Flor y es un niño muy amoroso, muy respetuoso y con un alto sentido de moral inculcado por sus padres muy trabajadores.
I'm lucky enough to know Mrs. Floor's daughter, son. He's a good child and he's respectful and kind.
Él tuvo un incidente de violencia hace unas semanas y es la razón por la cual estoy aquí.
He was bullied a couple of weeks ago, and that's the reason why I'm here.
La violencia, cualquier tipo de violencia, denigra la integridad del ser humano.
Any kind of violence is denigrating any human being.
La violencia no debe ser tolerada en ningún momento, mucho menos en nuestro distrito escolar, que se ha caracterizado por ser un distrito de alta seguridad y respetuoso.
We shouldn't be tolerating any sort of violence, especially in this district that has been known for battling this kind of issues.
Yo los exhorto a cada uno de ustedes a que juntos como comunidad trabajemos y seamos más proactivos para crear programas que ayuden a que no sigan pasando este tipo de situaciones.
I'm requesting everybody here tonight to get together and create and try to brainstorm about creating new programs to battle bullying.
Juntos podemos hacerlo. Muchas gracias y buenas noches.
If we can work together, we can make this work. Thank you and good night.
Gracias.
So good evening again. My name is Flor Montero. I just would like to ask you if there any the districts had any funds, especially for bullying, and if not, how can we help to do that? Also, the next year, I know there's gonna be some changes with the coordinators that are not gonna be here at the beginning of the year. I know the new principal is going to be working on it, but also how can we do it? I know, do we have a plan? So to right away start making the changes, or as a parent, can the district invite parents to be volunteers and come? And I know it's been hard to find people to do the dirty work, but I mean, if we can come with ideas, so can we work together to do some changes, but to see it. I have been hearing after the incident happened with my son, I've been hearing a lot of parents that have been going through, and the kids don't want to talk about it. They don't want to say anything because they're afraid, because the kids are saying like they're going to be beat up like my son was, and they don't want to say anything about it. I don't know if that we can educate, not only focus on the victims, also, and the kids are doing that because there's something behind them. They need support, they need help. Like, can we do some classes? Can we do some workshops, or I don't know, something that we can bring to both parts and change that situation, because it's not acceptable to have violence in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a question with the hearing. How does that work?
I was just going to say, do we close the hearing and then, or do the trustees comment as well? The trustees comment before we close the hearing? Is that what?
Okay. I'll do a quick minute if I can, Madam President, likely. So in terms of the issues brought up by the group, I think it makes sense. And I think Flor is actually the incoming ELAC president at Graham next year. So I would like to suggest that perhaps, depending on what we can do, I would encourage the group to also be able to get the support they need within Graham with our new principal, Michael, but also try and see what they can work with as a team with the PTA and possibly form that partnership so that we can take on the issue of bullying, for example, at the school site level, and then see what we as a district can do as a complement to that. And I like the idea, though, that they brought up, which was if someone is acting violently or what have you, and then there's consequences for that, that some sort of workshop or social emotional work or viewing of a program to have them better understand what not to do would help out a lot. And combined with some sort of help from either the CHAC or the local school psychologist or what have you. But the follow through with that, I think, is key, because that's not just happening here at Graham. Bullying is an issue district-wide, and unfortunately within the area, it's not uncommon, and that's the sad thing. Thank you.
In bringing this back to the LCAP, goal 4 says ensure a safe, healthy, and respectful district and school environment to increase engagement, involvement, and satisfaction of students, staff, parents, and community members. And I haven't looked at this. Yeah, I read it before, but given the comments this evening, are there any monies in here that are dedicated and goals that are specifically for bullying? I mean, I think the whole goal kind of encompasses some of that, but
I think Dr. Rudolph wants to make a comment, and
I'm
then
sorry,
I'm
I
happy to add as well.
So one thing I would say is that we do provide a pretty sizable amount of money for yard supervision duty. This year, Graham actually did not spend a majority of their yard supervision duty money. So one of the things that we need to make sure in working with Mr. Hermosillo is to make sure that those monies are actually taken care of. We do provide targeted student support monies, and then as part of the LCAP, when we look at our discipline data, any school that is in orange or in red actually is required to develop a particular plan. We do, as one of our monthly PD meetings with our principals, look over the data and talk about what's transpiring at a particular site. In some cases, it requires to make sure that we are being diligent in entering the information. And some schools are better at entering information than other schools. And so one of the follow-ups that we have for next year is a little bit more a tighter approach to make sure that information is entered so that we can monitor it a little bit more closely and hold schools accountable for resolving these types of issues. But it is a ongoing focus of ours. And I will say, and I think everyone on staff sort of agrees with this. We're not in the business of letting a kid hold a school hostage or a classroom hostage. And so while we do look for ways to intervene and to reduce our suspensions, at the same token, that does not mean that schools are not supposed to take care of these types of incidences. And so we will be working with each principal at their particular site to make sure that we are meeting goal 4 within our strategic plan. And safety is a big priority and will continue to be a big priority at our site.
I have a specific question about Graham next year. I know that 2 personnel that are leaders that help this community will not be starting the school year with us next year. They're taking a couple months off. So can I ask you what the plan is to substitute for them or cover for them?
The other thing I will say is that Mr. Hermosillo has already started his plan on reorganizing the school. There were several instances where we weren't being as efficient as we could to address particular needs. And so he has been working not only with us, but also with our maintenance team to sort of make some changes, not only to the front office, but also to how he deploys his staff to make sure that he can address these particular issues. And so I do believe that there are enough staff on campus to address it. What I would say is I think, having a new fresh set of eyes who can go through and look at it and say, why are we doing X or why are we not doing Y? Is going to be a beneficial thing in terms of resolving this issue.
And I have one last thing. You all had brought this up at DLAC last night. The issue of security cameras, we've brought that up at the board as well a few months back when we thought about what we could do with the money that's left over from Measure G. And I know we had discussed that in general, so I don't want you to think that we haven't thought about that. We thought about that. It's just that right now I don't think we're at the point of being able to figure out how that would work and how much it would cost.
Right. So we did figure out what the costs are. What I would say about security cameras is that it's actually more of a passive approach, meaning that because I was a principal of schools that had security cameras, what it allows you to do is to go back in time to identify victims, but unless you have someone who's actively monitoring the screen, it doesn't help with being a proactive approach. What is effective, though, is assuring that every staff member that is assigned duty is out there doing their duty, and that we're walking around and that we're in the rooms or on the yard duty, or that we're spending the funds for yard duty to make sure that kids are being safe. Those are really our biggest leverage to pull versus the cameras. It would only help us in the event of this incident occurred. Now we need to find the assailant. We need to find the perpetrators to make sure that they're prosecuted.
Or just held accountable in this
Yes,
case, right?
or held accountable,
They're
yes,
kids,
correct,
Yeah.
yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Ms. Bauer, did you have something else you had mentioned you wanted?
I just wanted to add that another piece in Goal 4 is the Health and Wellness Committee. And while the focus this year has really been on looking at suicide prevention and our protocols and processes, and that is going to continue, another piece that we are working on is that social emotional health and learning, and looking at how to support students and the whole child, as opposed to just bits and pieces. And so that's work that's going to continue next year. And the committee has suggestions on some different ways that we can bring programs that address some of these issues across the district as well.
Thank you. Any further comments before we close the public hearing, trustees?
And one last thing, CHAC is also going to work with us to make sure that we have Spanish-speaking counselors at the site to also provide additional supports. And so they are proposing, and we're in conversation with them, bringing 7 individuals. And so Graham is one of the sites that is going to be targeted to have a Spanish-speaking counselor to assist our current guiding counselor.
But by when?
So if it would be next year, 18-19 school year. We're finalizing the total cost of the program because it is an increase from what we paid last year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So at 10:07, the public hearing on the local control accountability plan is closed. And the next item on the agenda is the 2018-19 budget adoption public hearing.
EPA.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. Thank you. The public hearing for the Education Protection Act funding for 2018-19. Do we open it now or do you speak first?
I can just make a couple of comments. This is an annual event. This is the public hearing for the Proposition 30 Education Protection Act funding. The district receives approximately $1 million from the state from Proposition 30, and then we are required to have a public hearing as we outline our expenditures of those funds for the 18-19 school year. And as you can see from the EPA funding plan, all of the $1 million will essentially go to teacher salaries and benefits.
Thank you. So at 10:08, the public hearing for the Education Protection Act funding 2018-19 is open. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this matter? Trustees, any comments? Okay, I'm going to say 10:09 p.m., the public hearing for the Education Protection Act funding 2018-19 is closed. The next item on the agenda then is the 2018-19 budget adoption public hearing.
Thank you. So I'll present the budget, and then we'll ask the board to conduct a public hearing for input. So just as a reminder, the budget adoption process, we are near the very end of this 5-month process. May 31st, which is tonight, is the public hearing. I think it's important for tonight that we tell the story of how we got from second interim to estimated actuals. One of the big things that changed is that some revenues, expenditures, the ending balance and the reserve levels all have a significant change from when we presented the second interim in March, which results in a much larger ending balance for the current 17-18 school year, approximately $1.6 million than what we estimated in March. And why? There were 2 big reasons. First of all, there was a miscalculation. There was an internal working copy that projected the 18-19 budget inaccurately. It stated our revenues greater by $4 million and our expenditures were understated by or overstated by $2 million. So it made a pretty significant change for us. Also, a significant impact for us when we were planning from second interim to estimated actual. The other one was assessed valuation. When we were here at second interim in March, we were using 5% assessed valuation growth for the 18-19 school year. And the adoption, where we are tonight, we've changed that over the spring months to 7%. And that generates about $1 million more in revenues. So to drill down a little bit more into the change from second interim to estimated actual, our revenues increased by essentially about $250,000. That's a minor increase when you look at the large picture of our revenues. Essentially, those were some increases in donations. The county special ed, the SELPA, changed some of the current funding for the 17-18 school year. A big change for us was we decreased our current 17-18 expenditures by about $1.4 million. This was an exercise we went through. It's good budget practice to where we spend part of April and May going program by program, looking at the current 17-18 school year, the budgeted expenditures. For us, we went through with each department, each program, each school site, line by line, looking at each program of what we were budgeting to an expense. And as we went through those categories, most of them, of course, were unspent personnel costs and curriculum materials. You budget 100% for a staff member, but they start in October, or they leave early, or you budget a certain amount for hourly employee because you think they're going to work a certain number of hours every week for the whole year, but they don't. Those were significant amounts throughout the as we went through the process and looked at all of the current budget expenditures, personnel, each staff member, each category of employees as we went through the entire budget. So what the results were, the ending balance were increased, like I said, by about $1.67 million. That ending balance increase actually impacts the reserves for the current 17-18 school year. So what we showed in we showed at second interim in March was very different than where we are now ending the 17-18 school year, because we went through that exercise. So just to show you some of the numbers of where we are at second interim, you can see the beginning balance for as of July 1, 2017, both at second interim and estimated actual is the same. But you can see our revenues between the second interim and the estimated actual, $250,000, not so bad, but it was not good. It's good. But total expenditures are where we made this significant change. That's when we went program by program, line by line, adjusted to where we need to be. It was no more of how much money do you think you need for the current year? Oh, I think I need $20,000. It was now you have $15,000 still sitting in that account. How much money are you really going to spend between now and June 30? And the idea was, I think I only need another 1,000. We reduced it. And then we were doing that just a few weeks ago as we were still working on this. I sat at the last board meeting with director, chief, superintendent, and we went and department by department. So that's a significant change for us as we went from March second interim to estimated actual. The impact for that is that it goes through next school year at 18-19 budget adoption. So these are just the 18-19 assumptions that the board finalized on May 17th. Nothing has changed from there. I just wanted to put them as part of the overall presentation. That way, if someone pulls this out, you'll see where the assumptions were for the 18-19 budget adoption. So now, since we did the 17-18 estimated actual, what does that impact it has on the 18-19 school year? So because we had a much larger ending balance or estimated ending balance for the 17-18 school year, that ending balance rolls forward and becomes the beginning balance of the 18-19 budget. So those documents that you were seeing at the second interim in March that were projecting out what the 18-19 school year look very different than what they do now, looking at the 18-19 school year. Also, because we are able to eliminate or reduce planned expansion of programs, plus also new programs and expenditures. We were able to, over the MYP years, those next 3 years, it was a sizable savings to the overall budget and in the terms or in the actual impact for the 3 years. So this is the 18-19 budget adoption for unrestricted and restricted programs for 18-19. Revenues, expenditures. You can see unrestricted has a surplus. There's a deficit in restricted programs because we are still continuing to spend or trying to spend the carryover of restricted programs. The goal is we should be spending restricted programs down to zero every year. We try, we're getting much better. We're getting closer and closer to zero every year to having that ending balance. And you can see though, we're looking for the 18-19 school year of 34.4% reserve next year, which is about 2.7% higher than where we were at second interim, what we were projecting out. And the impact for the MYP, makes the biggest difference because what we sat in the spring going from second interim, the first set of budget assumptions, the second revised set of budget assumptions, we reduced a lot of planned new expenditures. I'll pick on one. It was the after-school extended learning program. And we were doing the first set of assumptions. It was $300,000 a year, each year. When you add up all 3 years, that's $900,000. That's a significant impact to the budget of the MYP. We did that across the board in a lot of those categories. We made a lot of reductions. Plus also, because we made the difference or made the reductions and the adjustments in the current 17-18 school year, our ending balance was much higher to start 18-19. So you take essentially that $1 million moving forward for the next 3 years, plus you're making those changes in the MYP, you can see it makes a sizable difference of where we were at second interim for the 18-19, 19-20 school year. So what we're projecting out right now with the adoption of budget, the 18-19 school year at 34%, we dropped to 33 and 32% in the third year. These budget numbers do not reflect bringing back any of the cuts that we've made, any of the adjustments we've made, the positions that we have frozen and have not filled at the moment due to attrition. Those positions are not coming back. I just want to be really clear. If we make any changes to that, these numbers will be different. So some considerations for the future. A lot of talk, we've talked tonight with the LCAP, any changes that might come up with our students and our families, new programs, new expenses that might happen. The local assessed value property tax growth is slowing where we are. Hopefully tomorrow will, June 1st, we typically get the first of each month, we get the update from the county assessor's office. We'll get our update for June. Hopefully it's showing growth over the prior month. May not, but we'll find out what happens. Employee negotiations is always an unknown and has an impact to the budget. Also right now, what we're dealing with is the enrollment and boundary implementation. If the board chooses to keep a certain number of portables at a certain number of school sites, that's an added expense that we weren't planning for. And then also just the continued growth in Mountain View with housing, more kids, more construction, more materials, more teachers, that all goes together. So next steps tonight, a public hearing for tonight for the adoption, and then we come back on June 14th. So, and these three things are done kind of, order 1, 2, 3, LCAP is first, EPA is second, which the board has done public hearing on the LCAP and EPA tonight, and then we'll do the budget now. And then on June 14th, we do the approval, hopefully the approval of all those three items in that order. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Any clarifying questions, trustees, before I open up the public hearing? Okay, at 10:18, the public hearing for the budget adoption for 2018-19 is open. Are there any members of the community wishing to speak on this topic? Any trustees wishing to comment? Okay, at 10:18 and 30 seconds, the public hearing is closed. Thank you, Dr. Clark.
Thanks.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is for review and action. It's for Resolution 1674.5/18, award authority for summer construction contracts to the superintendent or chief business officer. Dr. Clark?
Yes, briefly, as the board is well aware, we are coming into the summer full of construction. There are a couple of opportunities that are coming up over the summer when the board is in recess, where a contractor will accept bids on some of the kind of smaller projects that need to be done over the summer. So what we're asking for is the board to grant award authority to the superintendent and or chief business officer to enter into contracts, accept the lowest responsive bid, and to enter into and sign those contracts. And then the plan is that we will bring any of those contracts, when they happen, to the August 23rd board meeting for the board to review and ratify at that time.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Trustees, any clarifying questions?
Yes, I have one, just one. I'm sorry, TTO. My example is going to be that one. If we have a contract that's brought to the team and either you or Dr. Rudolph say yay, at that point, will we then have any action be started, or will the action begin after we approve this at the August 23rd meeting?
No, this is going to be this is very different than that.
Okay.
This is pretty common in school districts who have projects over the summer for construction, and boards don't meet over the summer. So actually, it will be early next week. We'll have a additional bid opening from one of the projects at Castro to dismantle some of the portables. The goal of this is the board to grant authority to the superintendent and or I, where we can actually sign that contract and they can start work. So,
okay.
Yes.
Which is great. And that's
And
why I
then-
threw that out there
right.
so we can have
So
that
it-
clarification. Okay.
It's to get through the summer, and then we
For
bring those
construction.
contracts back to you, the board, on August 23rd.
Sounds
These-
good.
Yeah.
Thank
these
you,
are-
Dr. Clark.
These are all construction
Yeah.
contracts.
Yes.
It's just the capital projects program, right?
Yeah. Correct.
Okay. Were there any members of the community wishing to speak on this topic? Any further comments, trustees? Okay, how do we read the resolution? Do we,
I move that the Board of Trustees approve resolution number 1674.5/18, authorizing the superintendent or chief business officer to accept low apparent bids and enter into contracts for summer 2018 construction projects.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, and a motion made by trustee Gutierrez and seconded by trustee Wheeler. Resolution 1674.5/18, authorization for superintendent or chief business officer to accept low apparent bids and enter into contracts during the summer for capital construction projects was approved unanimously. Do we need to read the full text? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, I trust people will submit their board updates to Ms. Lilga or already have done so. Were there any items for future agendas?
I have a list of about 10 issues.
Since we have time.
Since we have time until
Move to
11.
extend the meeting by 1 more hour.
We have our moments. This is how we
And
get
the
our kicks.
future board meeting dates are set forth in the agenda, but the next meeting is June 14th. And at 10:20, oh, do I have a motion to adjourn?
No,
We
you
don't need a
can go.
motion to
Yeah,
adjourn.
no, you're good.
At 10:22, the meeting, the May 31st, 2018 meeting of the Mountain View Wisconsin School District Board of Trustees is adjourned.
Sweet.
Thank
All right.
you.
Yeas and nays.